Some important topics, some not so much, about where we began and where we'll end up, and everything in between, on theology, things and stuff.
Welcome to Theology, Things and Stuff. Today I'm sitting down with Doron Keidar, an Israeli-American who serves in the IDF. That's basically the Israeli military. And he has spent hundreds of days in the past 2 years on active duty in Gaza with the Gaza conflict. So we're sitting down to have a very difficult conversation with hard questions that are coming up out of the West among the church. Certainly in the American church, we have those that are hyper pro-Israel, and then we have those in the church that are becoming very anti-Semitic for various reasons. So before we get in that, we're going to get to know Doron a bit. So welcome, sir. We're glad to have you with us.
Yeah, well, it's a blessing, brother. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, so you're an Israeli-American.
That's right. And in that order.
And in that order, an Israeli?
Yeah.
But your parents?
Even though my whole family, they're all American, literally my whole family is from the United States, I'm the only one besides my twin brother who passed away in Israel and my other younger brother who is still living. We're the only siblings that grew up separated from the rest of our family. So the reason why I say in that order, right, is because I was born and raised in Israel. So mindset and culture, I'm more Israeli, but as you can hear from my accent, I can also...
pretty Western.
It's pretty Western.
So you were born in Eilat.
Born in Eilat. Yes,
which
sir.
is down there on the Gulf of Aqaba.
The very southern tip of Israel. That's right.
Where it comes to that tiny point.
That's right. That's right. And
what year were you born?
Well, that's classified. Born in 1985, Pearl Harbor Day. Yes, sir.
85 or 80?
Did I say 85?
You said 85.
1980.
80. You're 45.
Me. That's right. And I'm 45. That's where the 5 comes in.
But
it's called dyslexic, and you know it's great, and you can just tell how I.
How does that work in Hebrew?
Oh man, yeah, exactly.
It's got to be worse.
Exactly. So imagine trying to juggle
left
English
to right, to left.
Yeah, right to left, and being dyslexic, and yeah, it's fun. It's lots of fun.
English is your second language?
Technically, English is my second language. That's
so
right.
Are you more fluent in Hebrew?
No, I'm actually, the irony is I'm more fluent in English.
Okay.
And that came years later, just by living in the U.S., going to school in the U.S., working here as well. And then just my wife, my family, she's Swedish, so we communicate in English. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of hilarious. And you know, it kind of rubs you wrong a little bit. You have these Jews that have made Aliyah, as it's called. They come back home, or coming to Israel, to their homeland after 1948, and they're called like new immigrants, right? And so we call them Olim. They make Aliyah to Israel, and so they'll ask me, "Where did you do Aliyah from? Like where in America, or are you Canadian?" And I go, "I'm from here. I was born and raised." But I can detect a little bit of an accent. And I'm like, yeah, about that. So it's kind of funny. I don't have an American accent when I speak Hebrew, but I have, apparently, it's kind of a soft, kind of an accent, almost like someone who wasn't born in Israel, because the Hebrew, what we call the tzabarim, which is what I am, a tzabar, someone who's born in Israel, they have more of a guttural, rough Hebrew-speaking accent, whereas like the French Jews or Jews who have immigrated from other places, you can hear their accent depending on what language they spoke before, and I think the French have similar kind of in their, because it's a very good Hebrew accent, and you can barely tell if they're French. Well, some have thicker, but so it's in between that. It's in between that. And they are like, are you from like Europe? Are you from, and then when they hear me speak, of course, American, because I don't speak English, I speak American.
Speak American.
American. Then they're like, oh, so you're an American. It's like, yes. And so I did not make Aliyah.
So technically dual citizenship.
Yes, sir. Dual citizenship.
So how did you come to be as an American born in Israel?
Yeah. Well, here's the fun fact. My dad, he really loved Israel. And he grew up in the 1920s here in D.C. in America.
So he had you super late in life.
Super late in life.
Like in his 50s?
probably in his 60s, actually. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Years ago. And, and what happened was he went to go fight the Nazis to defend against the murdering of Jews when he found out as a young boy. And he was 15 years old. So he lied about his age. He joined the Navy. He ended up in the submarine units, learned electrical engineering.
But that's the Pacific.
That's right.
So he wants to fight the Nazis, but he ends up fighting the Japanese.
He ends up in the Pacific because the boys that he grew up with in Washington, D.C., he was a swimmer. And I don't know if that's what happened because that was his crew. And he was a competitive swimmer. He would like win first place in the local competitions for his age. And the kids from the neighborhood, they all got recruited and were going off to war and sending him postcards. And I think that's what it was. It's just one of his buddies, his close friends, is in the Navy and says, hey, Jack, we're having so much fun over here. Come join us. Of course, he's lying.
Yeah.
Nobody in the Navy is enjoying being in the Navy, unless you're a Navy SEAL maybe. But any case, and back then, they were just starting that concept. He ends up in the submarines, learns electrical engineering, even though he doesn't graduate high school. And he uses that to build a business when he comes back home after the war. So he's 15 to 18 is when he serves.
So he served 3 years in the submarine corps?
Yes, sir.
Do you know the name of the ship he was on?
I don't. I'm researching it for my book because I'm actually writing a book about my life story. And we've done a deep dive. We've tried to get records. It's kind of becoming a pain to try to get that from overseas. Maybe if I'm here,
Send me the information. I could probably research it for you.
I would love
his
to get
name.
that.
Give me his full name. I could probably pull that.
Yeah. And actually, he's buried here in Nashville. So that's part of how I tried to get the records because he's in the military cemetery. Long story short, that's what brought us to Israel because he ends up in the building boom in Fort Lauderdale, Miami. He's one of the top 3 guys, contractors in those cities, doing very well for himself. And one of his buddies from the war says, "Hey, Jack, do you know that Israel just brokered a deal with Egypt that we helped them broker to give back the Sinai Desert after the 6-Day War? And now America has promised to send U.S. contractors to go build bases there."
6 days, was that in the 60s?
67.
67,
yes, sir.
Yeah.
So this deal was finalized somewhere in the 70s, right? And my dad goes, "Yeah, absolutely, sign me up." So he left his first wife, left my sister behind, who had just graduated high school, left them with all the money, the house, they were living very well-to-do, so to speak, right? And his wife actually ended up marrying one of the Fords, fun fact. Like the
Henry Ford Motor Company Ford.
Yeah, one of the Fords, right? And that was the crowd that my dad hung out with. I mean, that's who he was. But he was also just a very passionate guy specifically about Israel. And, so his buddy, like I said, told him about the project and he jumped on it and literally left everything behind and came with just a suitcase.
What drove his passion? What fed his passion for Israel?
He was very much into the Bible, reading the Bible, studying end times and that kind of thing. And that was very passionate subject for him. And that's what drove him to do that. But he didn't really live up to any very high godly standard, if you like. So he was also the party guy. He liked to, party, girls. It's like he lived like a dual life, so to speak. On the one hand, he's all about, what the Bible teaches and da-da-da. But on the other side, he's not really living up to a godly standard, if you like, which ended up years later after he married my mom. It became his downfall because he ended up basically becoming alcoholic because he liked to social drink and social party, right? Oh, it's just, we're just having fun. But after my twin brother died from a smoke fire that we had, which was a tragedy that we had in our home that we grew up in, we were 2 years old. We were just 2 years old. And the smoke fire started in our bedroom where we were in the same crib together, both my twin and I. And I was the oldest out of the two, by the way. And my brother, who was just born, was in the bedroom with my mom. And he apparently woke her up because he's nursing and all that. And she calls the neighbors because she can't see. The whole house is like dark, confused. And Yaakov, our neighbor, who's they're like second parents to us. And thank God they came, because Yaakov knows our house inside out. And the minute he opened the door, because he thought, that's odd, everything looks fine outside, And then he opens the door, and then billowing smoke comes flying at him, and he realized, oh no. And he saved our life. He pulled us out. And my twin brother, unfortunately, did not have any pulse. He was dead on the spot. And I had still a pulse, and they rushed me to the hospital to save my life. Whereas my younger brother, and my mom, they were fine. They did not get that massive poisoning from the smoke. And I'm a sitting miracle, because the doctors told my dad, who he was down in the Sinai contracting, he made it a few days later. It's a long story, but the short version of it is, the doctor tells him, we're sorry about your one twin. This one, he'll be a vegetable at best, or he's going to die as well. Those were my odds.
Yeah. 50-50.
Yeah. Definitely not living and active. That's for sure. Yeah.
So how did you come to be in the military? I know,
Yeah.
I guess most folks may not know that Israel has a required conscription.
Yeah.
Is that 18 to 20? Is it 2-year service? Is that mandatory?
Yeah, it's 3 years for men, 2 years for girls. They shortened it, I think, by either half a year or a few months. And now, after October 7, the military is now changing the standard, and they're bringing it back to 3 years and 2 years, if I understood correctly. So it's making a lot of the younger generation a little kind of ticked off, like, oh, wait, you're tacking on months of service. But in any which case, the women get 1 year less. And it actually depends where you're at. So if let's say you're in a tier 1 unit, you're going to sign off a minimum of 5 years. So all of those guys are going to do 5 years minimum. What would qualify as a tier 1 unit? A tier 1 unit is the equivalent to your SEALs. So we have our SEALs called Shayat Shlosre. You have Shaldag, which is Israel's Air Force Special Forces unit, the ones that did the deep raid deep into Syria a few months ago, eliminating all of the underground bunker rocket systems that they had pointed at Israel, that Iran had invested so much money in. So so you have units like that do the crazy missions, and it's the tier 1, just like you have. We don't have something, for example, as the Green Berets that kind of work with other population and force multipliers type thing, because we fight our own wars. We don't get others to fight our wars for us. So in a sense, or help others fight their war, rather, is really what the Green Berets try to do, is help the oppressed, right? So they'll go to an indigenous people group and basically help them stand up a proper fighting force to counter whatever, if it's a communist oppression, if it's Islamic oppression, or what have you, and help them liberate themselves. So we don't have that kind of a special forces outfit, because again, we don't really get involved with other people's wars. So it's all local and it's all indigenous, but we do have our undercover units who do dress like the enemy. They dress, so in this case will be the Muslim Arab terrorists who have a special garb and a special way of look. And not all the Arabs in our region dress the same or even have the same dialect. So there's a different dialect for a Hebron Muslim to a Shechem Muslim to a Gazan Muslim Arab. And so their job is to take on the identity of one of those identities and nail the accent, nail the dress, nail the gait of how you walk. I mean, it's a very specialty unit, which has also been made into a well-known TV series on Netflix called Fauda. And then people ask me if it's, are you Doron from Fauda? And I'm like, no, that's not what I do. But yeah.
I guess maybe before we advance.
So those are tier 1 units is what I'm saying, if that makes sense. It's different than yours, but it's similar in some cases.
Explain the geopolitical setting, because you just said, all these terrorists surround you, and we're Americans. Most of this audience will be American. When we think of Israel, we think biblical. We think David.
Yeah.
We think little town of Bethlehem, Solomon's temple. We don't, very few people, I shouldn't say that. We Christians make pilgrimages to Israel, so we've been there. But even those that have made pilgrimages to Israel, they think of Israel as terms of the old city of Jerusalem. They don't see that there's Tel Aviv and there's Haifa, there's modern metropolises. But explain why, or as best you can from your perspective, the geopolitical condition. Why does everybody around Israel hate Israel? Does it, and leave out spiritual elements, obviously, but does it go back to Israel becoming a state again in 1948 and land acquisition? It can speak to that if you would.
Sure. I'll put it like this. The reason why our neighbors are unfriendly is because they're Muslim. And according to Islam, there is no other rule of law. There is no other religious acceptance other than Islam within an Islamic culture and Islamic system. So it's not just that they don't want Jews in the region of a Muslim-dominant region. They don't want Christians. They don't want Druze. They don't want any of the other minorities. And point in case, because everybody thinks, oh, Israel's the problem. Israel's the fly in the ointment. We're the reason for all the wars in the Middle East. That's an absolute ignorance to the region. The reason why we have war in the Middle East constant is, and this is a fact, and you guys can research me and fact check me on this, but over 90% of all the wars in the world globally are Islamic representation on one side of the conflict or on both. In other words, it's either Muslims killing Muslims or Muslims killing others in any given conflict in the world today. And that is the culture and mindset of really and sadly of Islam. It's the teaching of Islam that basically teaches that there is only Allah, there is only the Quran, there is only the Prophet Muhammad. Nobody cares about Jesus. Nobody cares about Moses. Nobody cares about the prophet of the Druze, which is Moses' father-in-law,
Jethro,
right? By the way, so for those who don't know about the Druze community, it's a fun little thing that people can research. And I actually have a whole episode with the Druze on my podcast to share this, because I know that many people are ignorant to, like what you pointed out, they don't understand the makeup of the Middle East. And so these are minorities that are persecuted by the Muslim culture
the majority.
And the majority. And so they try to bully anyone else out that doesn't fit, because it's part of their religion.
Same with the Yazidi?
Same with the Yazidis. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Because again, it's the majority versus the minority, right? So Sunni and Shia and the list goes on. And that's just the region. And so I was going to say, so the point is, I was going to give an example that you have in Syria. So recently now, we're talking about just a few weeks ago, a few months ago now, but not too far ago, you had, what's his name? Al-Julani, the new head of Syria, who is the former head of Al-Qaeda and founder of the Al-Qaeda branch in Syria, who took power. And overnight, he goes from terrorist, one of the most wanted men by the CIA, he had $10 million on his head, to being welcomed in the White House by President Donald Trump. And people like me were warning against that and saying, what are you doing welcoming this tyrant, this terrorist into America? I understand diplomacy, I understand these things, but you're extending your hand out to known jihadists. And what did we get in Syria when he got into power? And this happened before Trump received him into America, by the way, just recently. The first thing he did when he got into power is he went on a killing spree, killing Druze, Christians, and Alawites, minorities. And they went an all-out slaughter, worse than October 7, and it was terrible. People were dying like by the thousands in the most bloody, horrific way by these jihadist extremists. And the world was silent. The world was too busy concerned about having a protest about free Palestine. And over in our neighbors, just not too far from us, these people were being killed. And so the IDF stepped in, actually. The IDF was the only military force in the world that said, enough. We can't stand by idly. Yes, we have our hands full with fighting our war against Lebanon and Iran and the Houthis. Like, we've been attacked by 7 fronts. And with that, we said, fine, we will open another front with Syria if we have to. We can't stand idly by and watch these people be butchered. So we stepped in and we did airstrikes and we did other things. We sent in the paratroopers and a few other forces to show a show of force saying, stop. And thank God we did that. I say thank God we did that. And I take extreme pride in that the Jewish people and the Jewish nation stood up and said, we're not going to watch our neighbors get slaughtered and sit here idly by, even when it's hurting us, actually. And operations are ongoing now for, at that time, about 1.5 years. We were already going on with our own war. And so that's the region. It doesn't accept others and the
being
Jewish
non-Muslim.
Being non-Muslim. And so that's why they don't like us.
So,
and the other thing is why they don't like us the most is because we're the first. We're the first monotheistic faith.
yeah.
And then Christianity comes out of Judaism and Islam comes out of both of us.
Right.
So in their minds, if we get rid of the grandfather, so to speak, of our faith, then we can reign supreme over Christianity and Judaism and beat them all. And so, yeah.
So because where we want to go with this is talking about the Gaza conflict or whatever is the proper term for it. And I speak to this element. I've actually got friends who are local. The wife is an Arab Christian who would have been technically called a Palestinian Christian.
Yeah.
She's probably about our age, mid-40s. Her grandfather, they were very wealthy Arabs, Arab believers, Arab Christians living in Israel before Israel was Israel again.
Before 48.
Before 48, So prior to that, we acknowledged that it was always Israel.
Yeah.
And then was 4th or 5th emperor called it Palestine just to spite it. Palestine comes from the term Philistia, so where it's a kind of a nod to the Philistines, which are Israel's ancient enemies. So again, I've got maps, all the literature, all academia refers to as Palestine. And I've got Christian theologian friends that are saying, listen, when you write, don't call it Palestine, it's Israel. Fair enough.
Sure.
So semantics aside, she's a Palestinian Christian or was a Christian, comes from a family of Arab Christians living in Palestine prior to 48, very successful. So, World War II is over, almost as just some kind of retribution or redistribution or whatever you call it. We create as Israeli state. The birth of Israel again. After World War II, after the Holocaust, Israel becomes a nation again. You open the doors and allow the Jewish people to return from Armenia and Europe, all over Brazil. And I don't think, what I just learned, I didn't know this, and this is my ignorance up until 3 or 4 years ago, that there was, those folks were dispossessed. The Arabs were moved out. This lady, this friend of ours, her grandfather had everything taken from him to make room for Jews. This was part of the story I didn't know, which I'm speaking to the conflict, the tension between those that are in Gaza now and on the West Bank. Is that, and I'm asking for clarity, is that where they were pushed to when Israel became a nation again in 48, making room for Jewish people to repatriate the Promised Land? That's what we believe as Christians is the Promised Land, which I think is some of the justification for it. God promised Abraham this, 1800 BC, coming out of Ur of the Chaldees. We believe this is God's land given to the Jewish people from which Jesus Christ is born. He becomes our Savior, the Savior of the world. And I think that's why the winners of World War II, being a Christian united front, say, yes, let's honor Israel, give them their land back. But in doing so, we had to dispossess Arabs.
Others.
Sure. So I'm asking, were a lot of those pushed into Gaza? Is that why the Gaza Strip exists and the West Bank as well?
So to answer your question, first of all, I don't know this woman's personal family story, so I can't speak for her.
Sure.
Maybe she interpreted things that way. Maybe her family told it that way. But what I do know is that both Christian and Muslim Arabs, because the people groups that live in the Middle East, that live in the Levant, they're not Palestinian. There isn't such a thing as a Palestinian people. I've been traveling with a book that it's been written by a well-known Bible scholar, teacher, who has given both the historic background to where this mythical label comes from, where it was created, and become a thing today where we all label them Palestinian, but there isn't such a thing as a Palestinian people group, culture, language. Who's the first Palestinian king, is why I ask people. What's the flag of Palestine? What's the capital of Palestine? But if I ask some farmer in like China that doesn't know the Bible, doesn't know Israel, but they might have heard, about, and ask them, who is the first king of Israel? They might say Solomon, you know, right? They might say King David. They won't say Saul, but hey, you're close. You're right. You heard. In other words, it proves that this narrative is not just our own narrative that we tell ourselves and a myth, but these were real characters, real history, and it's impacted the world. When you ask a Palestinian, it's their culture, it's their heritage that they claim, and they can't answer you this.
They cannot.
No. Ask any Palestinian that says they're Palestinian, what was the capital of Palestine that you ruled in, and who was your first king? Ask these two simple questions. Who was the first king of Palestine? So, you'll get crickets.
Yeah. Because
they don't know. Because they don't know that they themselves as Arabs have been propagandized by the KGB, by the Russian secret like CIA style, that has fed into a narrative, and they took this historic labeling of the land of Israel from the exile in starting in 70 and then in 135 AD, where the Jews were expelled by Rome. They renamed Jerusalem to Io Capitolina, and they renamed all the district of Judea of the Empire of Rome in that area for Judenrein, they called it Palestine. Here's another fun fact. Even that term is completely faulty, because there wasn't such a thing as Palestinians. Even in the Bible, they're not a people group. I mean, they are, but not the word. The word isn't relating to a people group. It's actually a Hebrew labeling that because it's written in the Hebrew Bible. It's what the Hebrews called the invaders, both Egyptian invaders, historically, and the ones who came from Greece, the Phoenicians. So both were called
Palestinians.
Plishtim. The word Plishtim in Hebrew means liflosh, polesh, invader. So the term is a label called, here come the invaders from the sea. Here come the invaders from Egypt.
Further confirming that.
Because these are two different people groups, right? The Egyptian invaders are one people group, and the Greeks, who that came from the sea, are another people group. And how do I know this? Because I studied history, because I studied archaeology. I've done the tour guide course in Israel, and I've seen with my own eyes the facts, and that just scream, very loudly, the historic backdrop to who these people groups are. Nowhere, anywhere can I find any historic record to a Palestinian people group. They don't exist. So neither in the Bible is there such a thing as Palestinians. I mean, it's written, but it's a Hebrew term referring to invaders, and neither is it a modern people group any time in modern history. But what it is a propaganda tool that Yasser Arafat was encouraged to use as a means to fight Israel and to delegitimize Israel's right to the land post-48, like you asked. And so back to your original question, because that's first, you have to get that out of the way because people are so confused with this term. So let's start with that. They're Arabs. And you have Christian Arabs and you have Muslim Arabs. Okay? Those are the people groups. Then then they come from different places. They come, and I can ask any one of them, tell me your family name. If he's Halabi, he comes from Syria. If he's Al-Masri, he comes from Egypt. Okay? This is how I know to identify your ethnicity and where you come from of the Arab people in the Middle East. Yeah? So that's one, first of all. So whoever these people are, I just ask them those simple questions. Where you come from, based on, okay, just tell me your name and I'll tell you where you're from, basically. You don't have to go deeper than that because they're tribal. So the Arab region that we live in is tribal, and the Jews are not. I mean, we're our own tribe, if you like, but we're not part of their multi-tribe Bedouin groups. You know, we don't fit in. We're not Muslim. We're not Christian, and it rubs them wrong. And so what happened in 48, we didn't displace neither the Christian Arabs nor the Muslim Arabs. They fled because their leaders lied to them. And I don't know if they necessarily lied, if they believed the rumor themselves, actually, even, because a lot of times in the Arab world, they believe a lot of propaganda. It's a very sad trait within my region that the Arabs are very good at spreading false information, but also they really believe it even. You know what I mean? It's very sad because it's hard to reason with somebody who is so steeped in propaganda thinking, even when you're in that region. So it's not even you here in the West trying to figure out the Middle East. In the Middle East, they're confused about their own reality. And so these Arabs were fear-mongered and told the Jews are coming, they're going to take over everything. The British gave them Palestine, and the Jews are going to come and they're just going to kill us all. So many just left everything. And based on what you just told me, she came from a wealthy Arab Christian family, and that's a very common story, by the way, because they're the only ones that could afford to leave. The other Arabs who stayed couldn't afford to flee, and therefore they stayed, and they're still part of Israeli fabric of society of today. They are citizens of the state of Israel. They are voting citizens of the state of Israel, and they have Arab representation in Israel's Knesset, in the government of today. And you have Supreme Court judges who are Christian Arabs. You have high-up officers in the IDF who are Christian Arabs and Muslim, both.
Okay.
And you have Druze and all these other minorities. They're all part of the fabric of the Jewish state of Israel. Yes, it's Jewish state, predominantly Jewish, if you like, but we don't oppress the other minorities. Quite the opposite. It's a democratic country, so any of the population within our country, and especially those who are indigenous when we came in 48 and didn't invade and came later, because you asked about Gaza, well, that's from a later invasion. That's post-Six-Day War. So in 48, when they lost, we ended up with a batch of what we call refugees of the Arab nations and of the Arab tribes of the Arab nations who were the bottom of the totem pole. They didn't want them back. So they lied to them. They said, we're going to conquer Israel. We're going to destroy these Jews. We're going to take their land. And now you're going to have honor. Now you're going to have that Jewish people's land and their homes and their businesses and everything that in the 1800s was being developed by these Jewish entrepreneurs. And they were lied to because when the war was over in 48, they said, no, we don't want them back. And by gunpoint on the borders, they said to the state, to the IDF, we don't, if you send them through here back to Egypt, to Jordan, to Iraq, they came from all over. We're going to shoot them at the border. We don't want them back. So we ended up with a refugee crisis. In other words, Muslims who came to invade us
became refugees
because the countries they came from, invaded from, don't want them back. And then that happened again in 67. So it's a mix of those and actual indigenous Arabs who lived there with Jews for centuries. So you have both. And neither has been expelled. Neither's homeland has been taken. Are there exceptions to this rule that I just told you? Probably, sure. Injustices happen in war. People lose land. People lose property and business. It happens in every war, and it's not fair.
So what about the development of the kibbutz along the Gaza Strip? Because the accusation we hear in the West is the Jews are stealing land that was given to the Gazans or the Palestinians in Gaza, coming out of all the different various skirmishes. So
right.
So I understand the mindset because we're Americans. We believe in westward expansion, and
yeah.
So there's I guess that tinderbox of controversy with the kibbutz are popping up, the little farming communities that are encroaching on land that's supposed to be designated for the Arabs. Is that accurate?
Not even close.
Oh.
Yeah, not even close. So what happened is...
God bless my media.
Yes. So what happened in 67, we actually gained all of the Gaza Strip. We gained all of the Sinai Desert. We gained the
Gained
Golan
them from
Heights.
Egypt?
Huh?
Gained the Gaza Strip from Egypt?
From Egypt, yes.
Okay.
So that's who ruled there up until 67.
So
nobody cried about Jordanian occupation of Jerusalem from 48 to 67, 19 years. Nobody cried about that. Nobody cried about why didn't they create a Palestinian state of the West Bank? Because, by the way, you know what the West Bank is? It's the West Bank of the Jordan River of Jordan's rule when they conquered that land in the 48 war. That's where that term comes from.
right, even though it's on the east side of Israel.
Even though it's on the east side of Israel. Yes. So these terms are ignorant terms these are terms that are being used in an ignorant way by ignorant Westerners who don't understand the region, they don't understand the backstory, and they naively take the story like the one you just shared of a friend of yours. I'm not saying they're trying to mislead you. I think either they're misled in interpreting what happened, or they were wronged, and they were those who fell victim to land that got taken over by probably Jewish people that were like, all right, well, these Arabs aren't going to come back to their house or whatever, so let's find a legal way to who gets this. Sure. Again, I mean, injustice happen. I'm not going to justify and say, no wrongs have ever been done. Of course, but that's war,
But with
have Americans and the creation of America, wasn't it not on the backs of other people's land was
Sure.
taken? Right? So how far do we want to take this? Remember, when you point one finger at Israel and injustices that we're so-called committing, there's three pointing back at you, right? As we say.
Yeah.
In other words, it goes both ways. So do we want to criticize European expansion and how countries in Europe expanded and whatever post-World War I, post-World War II? How far back do you want to go? And I think it's just a nonsensical double standard that's only applied to Israel and to the Jewish people because, again, it's politicized, it's misinterpreted, it's twisted, and it's everything but what I just told you and just tried to make clear here for your audience. So if you don't have that backdrop and understanding, it's easy to say, oh, this injustice is done and whatever. You know what? Just ask the Muslim Arabs themselves who live in Israel and enjoy Israeli society and peace and prosperity. This is a fact. The Arabs living in Israel are the most prosperous Arabs in all of our neighboring countries. Fact.
like per capita.
Per capita.
Because I'm just thinking, I've been to Saudi Arabia twice. I can't speak to all of Saudi Arabia, but the places I've been in, Riyadh, mostly Tabuk,
Yeah.
Hakal, very, very prosperous. So maybe it's a per capita.
Yeah.
Not to challenge you.
I'm not talking about Saudi Arabia, so
Okay.
forgive me. There are exceptions. I'm not
Okay.
talking about the
Emirates
oil.
and
I'm talking
Qatar.
about the normal Arab countries like Jordan,
Syria.
Egypt, Syria,
Yeah. Okay.
and Lebanon.
So surrounding.
Those ones, right? Have you been to Egypt?
I have not.
It's an armpit. It's an armpit. It's on my bucket list, but everybody who's been there tells me, oh, it's the dirtiest, nastiest Arab country I've ever been to. And I'm like, isn't that sad? Isn't that sad? Because, we both share a passion for history, archaeology, Bible. And for me, there's so much I want to see. But at the same time, I'm also not, because I'm from the region, I'm not naive to understand that there does pose a certain threat for me as an Israeli Jew to go to my Arab neighboring countries in search of archaeology and whatnot. It's an adventure that I'm not willing to take, right? No matter how great my passion is. And it's sad because that is the region that we live in. So really, I'm the one as a Jew who's endangered in my region. I'll give you an example. The areas in Judea Samaria, which is known as the West Bank or the Palestinian territories, there's areas that's completely controlled by the Palestinian Authority, known as the Palestinian Authority, by who's the head of
Ahmed Abbas.
We had Mahmoud Abbas, and then in Gaza you have the heads of that people group, Arabs, Muslims, they call themselves Palestinians, is Hamas. Okay, so in other words, the ones who rule.
But it used to be PLO down in Gaza.
It was both.
Both. Okay.
There's many other terror groups we don't talk about because they're smaller, but these two are the main ones. There's many more.
Okay.
There's Aqsa Brigade. There's this. There's that. There's plenty. So not to confuse people, I use big terms. But point being is that under the PA, Palestinian Authority, me as an Israeli, not a Jew, as an Israeli, it is forbidden by law, big red signs, to enter PA-controlled areas. It says forbidden to entry for any Israeli citizens, because remember, in Israel, I just hope that would make clear, we have Jews, Christians, Muslims, Bedouins, Druze, and other minorities, etc. is the makeup of Israeli citizenship and culture, not just Jewish. So for any Israelis who hold an Israeli ID card, it is forbidden by law to enter this area because threat of death. Threat of death.
Even Israeli Arabs, even an Israeli Arab can't enter.
Even an Israeli Arab. I'll give you an example of that. And so that's entering. There are no big red signs, and these are big red signs. I'm telling you, it's huge. And it's in 3 languages. It's in Hebrew, Arabic, and English. So there's no lost information for any of the, whatever your background is, hoping we were clear. So to enter those areas, it's forbidden for us. There is no signs entering Israel proper saying no entry to Palestinians, threat of death. Nope. In fact, we have hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who have work visas, or maybe tens of thousands now, post the October war, we've cut off all Palestinian work permits, because they use those work permits to attack us and gather intel, by the way. So up until October 7th, you had, we'll just say, tens of thousands of Palestinians daily working in Israel with work visas and permits to come into Israel and work and go back to their homes and live very well off of our economy, because they get the salary that's 4 times the salary you would get for an equal job under PA control area. So they're being very wealthily, handsomely compensated, if you like, and you get equal opportunity. So they work in a factory. You become the foreman if you do good. Oh, he's a Palestinian, he doesn't get to, no, there's no discrimination in Israeli society. But I'll give you an example on like you asked about what if an Arab tries to enter those areas? They do, because they speak Arabic like they do. They understand the culture and the dialect and all that. And some will try to, in order to get a cheaper mechanic to work on their car, for example, and save money. There was an incident just before the war broke out of October 7th. You had this terrible incident. A young man from a Druze community who are Arab speaking, and they also ethnically look Arab in their look, entered into Shechem, okay? Also known by the international community as Nablus, but it's not Nablus, it's Shechem. Nablus comes from the Romans, again, the Romans, who called it Naples. Arabs can't say P, so they call it Nablus, because they can't say the P.
Naples.
And just like the Palestinians can't say Palestinians, Palestine, because they don't have P. Another fact about the Palestinian myth. Sorry. So this young man went in there, got in a horrible car accident, and ended up in the hospital. Well, they started to treat him thinking he's an Arab, because, he's unconscious, he's talking Arabic, because they speak Arabic, the Druze. But then they could tell the dialect was a little not right. And then they checked and investigated further. It's like, oh, he's a Druze. So they held him hostage, his body, and then the terrorists went in there and they murdered the kid. And then they wouldn't return the body. Unlike Israeli society or Jewish Israeli society, the Jewish people, we don't lose our top and like the whole community says, forget that, we're coming in and getting our boy out. That's not part of, like, you won't see Jews doing that, typically. But because the Druze are more Arab mindset and more like, now you pissed them off, they got all their brothers and everyone, and they gave an ultimatum. They said, if you do not release our boy that you're holding right now, I think they gave him like 24 hours. They said, 24 hours, we're coming into Shechem and we're going to raise hell, basically. And then, of course, the Israeli government got involved with the PA and saying, come on, guys, like, we don't want a war here. Let's cooperate. And that's where you do have, between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, you'll have some kind of collaboration, if you like, and were able to get the kid out there without raising hell and creating a whole incident. But that's a classic example that you'll never hear in your media here.
Right. Let me ask you this, going back, because then
And that was just because he was Israeli, Druze.
and not an Arab, not a PA.
And because he's Druze. They hate the Druze. The Muslim Arabs hate the Druze more than they hate Jews, by the way.
Wow.
And it wasn't until 48 that Israel became a nation that Druze had representation, they had freedom of worship, and they were left alone for the first time in decades as they were surviving as a minority group within the Muslim Arab world.
So going back to the West Bank, so the Jordanians fought or had some kind of incursion, took that over, crossing over from the Jordan River, which is now the boundary between Israel and Jordan.
Correct.
And so they took the West Bank, which is eastern Israel, but western Jordan.
Correct.
Why did they do it? They just wanted to steal land from Israel? Wanted to take land from a baby reborn Israeli nation?
Yeah. So 1948, to understand 1948, you have to understand the Balfour Declaration. And to understand the Balfour Declaration and what it led to, you have to understand San Remo. It all goes together. Everybody who claims Israel's right to the land of Israel modernly, diplomatically, historically, almost all will say the UN vote in 1948. But they're wrong, because the United Nations does not have they cannot create international law. Okay? The United Nations is a mediator body to help nations not go to war, is really what they all are supposed to do. Because the whole concept was post Second World War to prevent any future world wars, right? And that's what the UN was created for. They can give advice, they can make diplomatic pressure, but they cannot create law. Post the First World War, and with the backing and falling on the advice of Lord Balfour, which is 1917, so Lord Balfour declares and says, as England was gaining land and gaining the land of Palestine under Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, they decided that this landmass, which included modern-day Jordan, by the way, it was called the British Mandate of Palestine. So Israel and Jordan, one chunk of land was the British Mandate of Palestine post-World War I. And they declared and said, and Lord Balfour said, I believe that we need to decide that this should be allotted to the Jewish people. It's their ancestral homeland, and they have the greatest claim out of all the people groups that live there to do so. Okay, well, thank you, Lord Balfour, but again, you don't have the right to choose that. Then the League of Nations convened in San Remo, Italy, and all the leaders of the victors of World War I convened, and they listened to the Muslim Arabs, the Christian Arabs, the Bedouins, everyone that came and presented their cause of who should get the right to rule this new land that got taken over by England.
Post-Ottoman,
exactly. Because up until here, we have Ottoman rule.
Yeah.
So everyone kind of brought their case, and so they convened in 1920. In 1922, they officiated and decided and declared that the British Mandate of Palestine, including modern-day Jordan, I'm reminding, should be the homeland of the Jewish people, is what we believe. And that is international law created. That's the creation of the State of Israel. But the Jewish Zionist movement at that time were only concerned about putting up kibbutzes, cultivating the land, and trying to bring more Jewish population to inhabit the land. And people need to understand, it's not like the expansion of America and a bunch of cowboys just trying to expand. It's Jews who are terrified to leave the comforts of living under persecution in Europe and where else we were in the world, and just submitting ourselves to the Tsars, laying our head low, don't draw any attention. Like, what can we do to basically not tick anybody off? And so we were afraid to inactuate the fact that we have a right to anything, let alone our ancestral homeland. So the biggest challenge of the so-called Zionist movement was to encourage Jews to do the bold act of make aliyah and just live in the land. You don't need to be terrified of that.
Aliyah is the transfer back home, the move
to come back home. So that was the big thing. So even though the League of Nations said this is the Jewish homeland, it didn't catch in the Jewish world because we were too afraid
to leave where you were.
Because it was like, at least we know that here, if we lay our head down, just a few of us will get beat up and killed. Not maybe all of us die from malaria and whatever dangers in this other back in our homeland.
So loosely,
and so it wasn't until 48 that the momentum slowly picked up, and Jews started to recognize and go, wait, maybe this is a good idea. And so Jews were coming back, but at this point, we were on the brink of World War II, and the British, who were still controlling the mandate, because there was no action taken by either side, neither the Arabs, the Muslim Arabs, the Christian Arabs, or Israel, or the Jews. No one took the reins. So we all were like, it was a shaky time in history. And then World War breaks out, the Holocaust, and that's the kick in the gut to the Jewish world, and the realization we have no other choice. If we stay here, this is our future. Yeah. It's a Holocaust. At least I'd rather die in my own ancestral homeland. That's what kickstarted and gave us that gut hit of, let's go to where we've been given permission to establish a state.
So define Zionism, like as you understand it, because there's a lot of different flavors of Zionism.
Yes.
And then Zionism now is in the West a pretty dirty word.
Yes, it's been created into a dirty word because of propaganda. That's right.
So by your understanding as an Israeli Jew, what is Zionism?
The simplest understanding of Zionism, and this is what I am, I define myself as a Jewish Zionist, meaning that I believe in the Jewish people's right to establish themselves in their ancestral homeland, which the heart of which is Zion, which is Jerusalem, which is the Temple Mount. The word Zion is the term that God uses when he says to Moses and then later to Abraham, I will show you the place which is going to be my house where you're going to worship me forever. The place. And he tells Abraham on the third day, and he looked up and he saw the place from afar called Hamakom. That place in Hebrew idiom is both Hamakom, meaning the place, which is the center of the universe in Jewish understanding. This is where everything began, the navel of the earth. But it's also, but another term for it, which comes later, it's called Sion, meaning the marcation spot. So you know how you put a pin in today's GPS on your phone?
Right.
I'll send you a pin. God says, I'm going to send Israel a pin to Mount Zion. And Mount Zion means the mountain of the marking, the pinpoint, literally translated, like very rough translated, like directly. So in other words, Zionism means the place of God in Israel being the heart of, which is what represents, and it unifies all of Israel, which is the set apart land that God said, I will set apart this land for you guys to inherit and to live in. So Zionism basically is in actuating my right to my ancestral homeland, which is both our biblical right based on what God promised Abraham, but it's also based off of historic a history that we have had there for close to 4,000 years.
Do you think you could oppose Zionism without being anti-Semitic? Like Zionism?
Yes, of course. So you can, but I would say, but then it's stupid because it's basically saying, I'll put it like this: I oppose patriotism and America first. Why? Because I don't think it's, I don't believe Americans have a right to America. Why?
What about Zionism as an ethno?
So if I were to say I'm against you creating America and that this should belong to the Indians, the Native Americans, and you should leave, what would that make me? Anti-American?
or pro-Native American, pro-indigenous.
And in actuality, also anti-American, right?
Yeah.
What we know today as American, what American is, being an American. So look at it that way. It's like me saying the same for England, for the British. You know, well, this used to belong to the Vikings, so give it back to the Vikings. The Vikings, you need to give it back to. And again, it's a double standard. It's only Jews who are picked on and singled out for wanting to inactuate our right to our own land and our own independence. In fact, there's only one Jewish state in the world. There is no other place in the world where we've been welcomed and we've been allowed to be ourselves. So the first time actually in 2,000 years, by coming back to our ancestral homeland, that was, by the way, we got dispossessed by the Romans, who then dispossessed them by the Muslims and by the Mamluks and by. So it's like everybody who came in and out were the actual invaders. We just came back to re-inhabit our ancestral homeland.
And I think
all I'm saying is, no, I don't think it's anti-Semitic to be against that, but I think it's ignorant to be against that.
Sure. Well, the double standard
is a good way to put it, maybe.
Is of all people groups in the world, and this is a pro-Jewish statement, the Jews as a people still exist, even scattered abroad. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean this to sound anti-Semitic, but they don't assimilate.
No.
Because they keep their Torah.
Yeah.
They pass it down with strong parenting. They maintain their synagogues. So for me as a Christian, as an American Christian, a white American Christian watching from the outside, to me it's peculiar in the history of the earth, and that's not my field of expertise, but to see the Jewish people, they're scattered all over the world, and then there's a supernatural, as I see it, trumpet that's blown, and they all return. They want to return.
Correct.
I think...
But also it's important to point out, you said they don't assimilate. Today, this is the biggest problem for Jewry globally right now, is that many Jews today actually, it's a huge wave where they are assimilating and they are giving up their Jewish heritage. I think it's just because they chose not to go to the homeland that was created, and rather they prefer to be American or to be German or to be Swedish, like their nationality trumps their connection to the land of Israel and their right. And so they are the ones who actually are assimilating. And what you're referring to is more the religious Jews, who, yes, they are more. So just to be clear for the audience,
no, and I'm just thinking,
but you're right. That's what's preserved us. But it's actually more modernly today that Jews are starting to assimilate, and that's in the past 100 years.
I just think as a people, the Jewish people are very different because they're not just ethnic; they're like a religious ethnic people.
Correct.
And it is their religion that makes them ethnically distinct.
It's true. It's true.
Term.
That's what I'm saying. It's been for centuries. It's just in the past 100 years where that's turned and they become secular, and then they assimilate and start cross-marrying, and then losing their Jewish heritage.
Well, I think the Vikings,
and it's a big concern to Jews, but again, that's more modern.
The Vikings don't exist, so we can't give it back to them in England. And honestly, the Native Americans of North America, they don't really exist anymore. They're either
in the same context they were before.
But it's not like the Jews who have been scattered by the prophetic word of God all over the world, and they've maintained their Judaism.
Correct.
Even in the ethnic religious state. So
it's pretty supernatural if you think about it.
It has caused. I have a dear friend who came to Christ on that very observation in law school. He just, as a pagan, he raised his hand and he said, "I just got a question. We've talked about all these he was in ancient history. Mm-hmm. What's so special about Israel?" And they said, "What do you mean?" They said, "Well, Sumer doesn't exist anymore. Babylon doesn't exist anymore. The Egyptian Empire doesn't exist anymore. The Phoenician Empire doesn't. The Macedonian doesn't exist. Israel still exists." Doesn't that make you wonder if they're not really onto something? And that was his epiphany that led him to Christ.
Yeah.
And he also got him kicked out of class.
That's funny.
Let me ask you.
But it's so true, though. It's so true, and
it's
that's
supernatural.
And it's supernatural, and you have to be intellectually honest and look at it that way. And if you just ignore what you just said there, then you're ignoring something that is really an anomaly in human culture and the way we've evolved as a species, right? And created different cultures and religions and language and whatever. And just this one odd,
Tiny.
small fraction of a people group were able to somehow keep it all, together. And through all the odds, that's the other thing that people are forgetting. We've had every empire try to destroy us as a people group and try to rename our land, and try to take away our observances, not allow us to circumcise and keep the practices, doing everything to erase us, and yet we're still here. And for me, it's like you said, it's supernatural. There's no other explanation that I have.
Yeah.
I can't give a human answer to that, other
it is,
than
I
it
think
seems that God
among
is preserving his word that he promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Do you believe that because Israel functions as a refuge and guarantor of Jewish survival after centuries of persecution, that opposing its existence implies harm toward Jews?
Yes, 100%. Because we revert to the Jews of the diaspora, that we're always going to be looking over our backs and not finding a place of rest anywhere. And you know what? The question also can go to those who oppose so-called the right of Jews to Israel, let's say, and whatnot. Then I'm asking you, well, show me an alternative. It's easy to point out the faults, so to speak, right? It's easy to come and find this is a problem and that's a problem and Israel's a problem here and there and there. Well, can you give me a solution? Can you show me how to do it better? Because I guarantee you, if you have a good solution, an actual good solution, not just observation, or as people say, I'm just asking. Well, how about you give me some solutions,
And I'll just ask hypotheticals.
Yeah.
Do you think accusations of anti-Semitism might shield Israel from moral scrutiny? Like, if I guess here in the West, we feel like if we question Israel on anything, we're called anti-Semites.
Right.
And
right.
I question my own government. I'm not a big Trump guy.
Yeah.
I call balls and strikes. And I think we talked about this yesterday. Yeah. I mean, obviously Israel doesn't do everything right.
Correct.
The IDF doesn't do everything right. No
Correct.
nation does. And you threw it back at me, which I appreciate. You said, "What?" I said, "Why should Israel get a free pass?" And you said, "Why should America?" And I said, "Yeah, fair enough."
Yeah.
But we do. Hearing you talk, I hear America with a Jewish flavor, because I'm like, crap.
Yeah.
That's how we sound as Americans.
Right.
Might equals right. We have a right to our defense. We have a right to our people having safety and security.
Yeah.
I acknowledge that Netanyahu is not perfect. He's a man. I don't know politics. I'm also mindful that any information we get coming out of Israel is shed through the filter of European propaganda and American propaganda. I get asked the craziest, dumbest questions about Trump and our nation when I'm in England or Europe, Albania, when I'm in Africa. They want to sit down and have conversations, and you wouldn't believe the amount of malarkey being fed to them about our government. I was asked a question in England about, what do you think about this secret cult that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are a part of? And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. And they said, oh, it's all over our news. And I said, I'm not a big fan of either of those guys, but I would defend them and say they're not a part of some secret cult.
Yeah, some secret cabal, right?
Yeah, they're just billionaires playing billionaires boy club politics.
Exactly. And you know what? And that's the thing about Israel, and you're right. We're not a perfect nation. We never protested to be a perfect nation either. Nobody in Israel is going to tell you that. To my knowledge, I don't know anybody. I mean, I've been involved in executive protection for nearly 2 decades, doing security for some of the top world leaders, billionaires. I mean, the richest people in the world, okay? And some of those powerful people in the world. And so I'm just telling you that I've heard it all when it comes to politics, geopolitics, and perspectives and whatnot. And no, I don't think anybody in Israel says we're the best and we know the best. What we are is we're sick and tired of being treated differently and having a double standard against us. Hold us to the same standard you hold yourselves. Because some of the Europeans will say, oh, you want us to treat you like the Arabs. Well, so see, now you're saying that you do look at the Arabs differently. and you give them a pass for acting barbaric and disgusting and murdering and killing, they get a pass because he's an Arab. He's allowed to do that. He's allowed to go all jihad, right? I'm not, or Americans are not. Why? Obviously I'm not advocating that, but that's the level of the ignorance and arrogance I see from European leaders and American leaders. They expect us somehow, us Israelis, to be like you. First of all, we're not. We're Middle Eastern, and we live in the Middle East. So we're not like you. But what we have in difference with you, not in difference, in same with you, sorry, where we see eye to eye on things is that we believe in democracy. We believe in the European / what you have in America system of voting and democratic elections and so on, which is the anomaly in the Middle East. So we're very different in the sense that on the one hand, we're Middle Easterner in our mindsets and whatever, and that the majority of Jews in Israel today are Arab Jews. They come from Morocco, they come from Iraq, they come from Tunis. So we're more Arab-minded, and that's the majority of the Jewish Israeli population. But we have also a very strong pull from the European Jews, the American Jews, the Canadian Jews, who are like, yeah, but we're all about democracy in England and this and that and the other. And we're like, fine. So it's a melting pot of ideas and cultures and religions, and we're trying to make it all work. And so the difference, so we have a lot the same, but the differences are very big at the same time. So quit looking at us as if you're looking at yourselves, and quit making us have to live up to a standard that you don't expect the Muslim Arab neighbors to live up to and say, well, we expect you to be better than them. No, I expect them and us to be better. Yeah? Because we both come from the same region and we have the same culture, mindsets, and whatever. And if I'm holding myself to a standard, I'm holding them to that same standard. But the West is not doing that. The West has a double standard for Israel and a different standard for our Arab Muslim, sadly led by terrorist leaders, and they give them a pass. They give them a pass. We don't call out Hamas. We say they're just a people's liberation group. No, they're terrorists. But they rightfully, voted in Mahmoud Abbas. And when was the last elections? Same with Hamas in Gaza. When was the last elections? In Israel, we have election after election after election. Like, we have too many elections because we go to elections, we vote, we get our government, and then that government gets destabilized and we go to re-elections. And it's like, it's a nightmare, but it's democracy.
Well, let me ask you a question about the theology.
So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes, you can criticize our democracy. You can criticize how we do things. But my question is, have you asked yourself why you're so obsessed with criticizing me and not looking, for one, at yourself to begin with? Because I believe before I can criticize someone else, first I have to examine myself. First I have to examine my position and how right am I in this idealistic ideal. For example, here in America, I'm not going to vote for him because he's not Christian. So you just choose not to vote, period. I believe that the people I have to vote for, I believe it's my duty and right to vote, but I believe it's very important that I do take action and vote, even if it's for somebody that doesn't hold the exact worldview and values that I have. Because if I don't vote for this person over this person, and sometimes it is over, one lesser evil over a worser evil, you haven't exercised your right of influence and change, right? And I think that's kind of how people are also when they look at Israel. They're holding us to this crazy ideal that doesn't exist. It's a fallen world. And there are fallen people with sin, with faults, with lying and cheating and stealing, who, yes, are in politics. And to say somehow, though, that Israel's worse than everyone else, I'm like, look,
no, I don't think the question is
not
Israel worse than everybody else. I think the tension arises because of what we would call the theology of the land. When God promised Abraham, "I'll show you a land, I'll give to you your people, and all nations of the world will be blessed." So, the claim, the Israeli claim, and I don't think it's a bad claim, but that's our land because
Yeah.
God gave it to us. And
Well, it's not the only claim. It's what I just told you too, San Remo in 1920.
right. So then the world governments
So that's
agreed to give it
legally
back to you.
binding.
Yeah, legally binding.
Yeah.
So I guess then we have to evaluate Israel. Is Israel taking claim to the land because of the promise of God, or is Israel taking claim to the land because San Remo Accords, where they said we should give the land back to them? It's their land.
Yeah. It's both.
It's both.
It's both, because in Israeli society, you have religious Jews who believe in the biblical right, and that outweighs whatever political decisions are made. And then you have a lot of secular Jews who could care less what the Bible says, but they believe in the rule of law and democracy again.
So they
lean on
San Remo.
and or they'll typically say United Nations, but then I have to educate them and say, well, you do realize that the United Nations does not have
legislative power.
Yeah.
So then the question arises is, we have to then look at Israel. Are we dealing with Israel as a religious nation, the people under the Abrahamic covenant, Mosaic covenant, in which case all the rights and privileges belong to Israel? Are we dealing with them as a modern state? Because I think this is where the church in America, Christians today, when they close their eyes, they view Israel like David, Solomon, maybe Josiah at best, right?
Right.
And what we're dealing with is a much more complex geopolitical nation today. So I guess the questions I have in my circles are concerning October 7th, and we'll get to this in a second. The thing we might look at theologically is when Israel in the Old Testament, when it didn't keep its law, when it didn't keep the Torah, when it violated it mostly through idolatry, but also injustice and perversion and shedding innocent blood, God would raise up Philistines, Assyrians, Babylonians, Egyptians, time and time again. He would use them as judgment against them. So questions I've heard in the States today is, well, Israel has the most progressive abortion practice in the world, so to speak, very pro-gay because of the secular Israelites. And like you said, Israelis, you said that's the noisy minority.
Mm-hmm.
I would posit this, and this may be a hard statement. We would say, or someone would say, as long as Israel keeps rejecting God, you can expect more Gaza. You can expect more West Bank.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what would you say to that kind of statement? Because again, not everybody in Israel is fearing God, just like not everybody in America. Yeah. And I would agree that we're under judgment. We as Americans, we're under judgment. We wonder why our poverty rate's increasing, why homelessness is through the roof. I believe we live under the judgment of Deuteronomy 28. Mm-hmm. We've rejected our God. I would throw that back on Israel. Israel's also rejected our God, and you're fighting for your existence. What are your thoughts on such a statement?
Yeah. Well, for one, I would say I agree with it to a certain extent, but you have to be careful with that because, first of all, neither you nor me are God.
Sure.
So I do not want to be in the place of judge, especially when I look at my own life. I'll put it like this. I tell people, I've said this before, and I get feedback from my family about it. That's why I'm going to use this. Because you made this point and we never thought about it. I said, when you read about the characters in the Bible, when we read about how David failed miserably, committed adultery, how could he? He murdered a man, sent the husband of the wife he adulterated with into his death. Terrible. And I tell people, we read these characters in the Bible and we go, I can't believe they did this, or I can't believe they did that. And it's also part of why we know the Bible is so authentic and true, because it's so barely
raw.
Honest. It's raw. It's not trying to hide anything. And that's also Judaism. Judaism doesn't try to hide our characters, our flaws, or the Jewish people, right? By and large, right? Like when we tell our story, we don't try to just highlight how good we are. We recognize where we're wrong and where we fail. And I tell people, so with that thought, ask yourself this question: how do you think we would read your life story if it were recorded like the Bible? In all your faults, in all your failures. Do you think you would fare better than Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, Joseph, etc.? And I think when you ask yourself that question honestly, you go, oh, well, right? When I was a teenager, this, and when I did that, every one of us has a story, right? And everyone has faults, and we're not perfect. And I think that's the problem, is it's like we hold ourselves and others or whatever to this utopic idea of what we think should be. And that's what we kind of hold Israel to. And it's really ridiculous. It's like, well, like you said, Israel has one of the largest abortion systems in the world, like that we allow it to the point where
like the ninth month, yeah.
Yeah. And it's very extreme. I agree with you. It's terrible. It's wrong. I'm against that. But at the same time, the Jewish people are no different than you as a Gentile or as a Christian or as a Muslim. They're people just like you are a people. We're all people. We're all faulty and we're all fallen. And when you have a secular system that takes charge and trumps over our religious convictions and beliefs, which, like we talked about earlier, is the loud minority. And unfortunately in Israel, it's the loud minority that has taken over the judicial system, which trumps our political system. And that's why Israelis like myself were fighting for reform. And I heard it in American media and in European media, and it was twisted to he's trying to ensure he's like the supreme leader nonsense, and that there won't be checks and balances now. No, quite the opposite. What he's saying is, and what people like me are saying is, we need to remove the monopoly power the judicial system has over our culture, because I can go to the ballot and in a democratic way and vote and get my guy in there, so to speak. But it's like almost like useless when at the end of the day, the judicial system, which isn't by vote of the people or the government.
Are they appointed by for life in Israel?
Yes, and they're appointed by each other. They appoint each other.
Oh, that's worse than us.
It is worse than you. That's what we're trying to reform. That's what the reform was all about.
They were saying Netanyahu was trying to make him set himself up as a dictator.
Exactly.
Over that.
Exactly. Yeah. King Bibi, King Trump, right? You know, that king movement thing that they were talking about, right?
No kings. We don't have any kings.
No kings, you called it, right?
Yeah,
you called it no kings. So in Israel, so who's making those political protests? It's the same propaganda, the same elitists. They're funding people on the street, and they call it grassroots. That's why they all have the same tents from the same place in Walmart, same color, same T-shirts, same flags, same posters, same everywhere.
Cookie cutter. Very grassroots.
It's perfectly.
But all grass looks the same anyway.
That's true. That is true. And so I'm just telling people, like, just will you open your eyes and see what's happening? You're being played. You're being played. And now the right in America and the conservatives in America and the Christians in America also being played, because those same elites that have the power and that are, in my opinion, they are usurpative in the way they do things. They use their power and money and influence to influence social media, and they're socially engineering the way we think, and they're targeting you and me to change and to believe these falsities about our actual democracies, and getting you and me now to pipe in with the loud minority. You understand what I'm saying? And it's like, we're actually being targeted. And so if you look, for example, I just got back from TPUSA, America Fest. It was chaotic, it was crazy, and it was unfortunately too divided. And I was like, this is heartbreaking, because this is a beautiful movement that's about bringing God back into our country, into our politics, trying to make God first, make the American values that this nation was founded on, to make that revived in our public discourse and what we're all about. From that to slinging mud at each other and hating each other and being against each other, I'm like, and I said, guys, this is terrible. And I'm asking, do you know where you're getting this from? We're being played. We're being played, and we don't even know it. And you know when it started? I can tell you exactly when it started. Can you guess?
No.
COVID, that's when I saw it in Israel. The exact same thing. I have the privilege of seeing it in Israel, seeing it in America, and I'm able to see it from both sides. And I know it, and that's how I know it's the same, because it's the same marketing, the same posters. Remember George Floyd?
Yeah.
I can't breathe.
Yeah.
In Israel, there was a police officer who saw a Ethiopian Jew. I think it was 18 or 19, I forget, but he was still relatively young. Technically an adult, beating up a 13-year-old to death. This police officer was an off-duty officer with his family, and when he saw this altercation, he stepped in and said, "Stop, you're gonna kill that kid." And this thug wouldn't stop. He kept beating up the kid, and then the officer pulled his weapon and said, "I'm telling you to stop, I'm a cop." And he disobeyed him. And then the cop shot a warning shot because it got very heated. He shot a warning shot, and it was unfortunate because what happened, not with his intention, again, this was fully investigated, and the guy came out proven to not have intentionally tried to harm anybody. And what happened is a ricochet of the bullet that he shot, and it was they decided what you did was technically you shouldn't have shot a warning shot in the way that you did, and should have handled it differently. But because he shot the warning shot, and again, it's from a protocol that they're given, and it was the way he misinterpreted it. And when giving the warning shot, a ricochet of a frag of the bullet hit that thug. I think it hit him in the neck or something like that, and it mortally wounded him, and he died. In the streets, you had riots, you had violence against blacks in Israel crap. I'm like, anybody who knows the culture, knows Israeli culture, knows that the Jews from Ethiopia are not treated as second-class citizens, and we don't have racism in the classic form of how you have racism in America. But the whole thing on the streets and the riots and the protests was spun with the Black Lives Matter and, let them breathe. And let me tell you, you remember George Floyd's picture? They had that picture with that colorful kind of looking.
And they made murals of it?
And made murals of it. They had of this kid. Exact carbon copy of this Ethiopian kid who was a thug. And they made it into police brutality against blacks. And I was like, are you kidding? Because we have Ethiopian police officers. We have Druze police officers, we have Christian Arab police officers, we have Muslim Arab police officers. In other words, we have police officers from all of walks of life in Israel, which is a melting pot. And to declare that somehow we mistreat and as law enforcement, specifically on Ethiopians, is a ridiculous claim.
Any thought on the kid that he was getting beat to death?
Did
they ever bring that up? The Ethiopian is beating some kid to death.
No, they didn't bring it up because the whole thing was, it was so politically spun that you didn't even hear about the victim or why the officer shot. Instead, the media, which is controlled by the far left, spun it. And the thing is, everybody was getting sucked into this politicization and misinformation of the facts, like is what's happening in America. Because what happened to George Floyd, for anybody who knows the facts and knows law enforcement, how things work, whatever they did wasn't wrong. They were following protocol. What was wrong is he was high on drugs.
Yeah.
And that was what resulted in his death. And I even said it before, because I watched the raw footage, not the edited one, because I've worked with law enforcement in Israel, and I know how things get misinterpreted by the public, and as if the public knows what protocols are. And I remember watching the footage, and I was like, what I saw was incompetent police action, because I could tell these men that answered the call they did not get the right training that they needed to know how to handle such a high drugged and big, strong guy that they were dealing with. And so, it was sloppy policing work, but it wasn't negligent.
What about, I'm going to go back because
So in any case, I know I'm going to tick a lot of people off here with that, but the point that you need to understand is when you understand the facts, but then when you understand that you're being played by media and social media and we're being deceived, and this all happened during COVID because we all got into our phones. We all got into social media.
Pipe hole.
And that became to me, the kickstart of most of all of this propaganda that social media is being used to divide us.
Yeah.
Left, right, right from the right, left from within the left, Muslims against Jews, Jews against Muslims, and Christians, and so on and so forth. It's to divide anyone and everyone on any given issue, and we're being played. And all I'm saying is pay close attention and ask yourself, what is the motive behind what I'm consuming? What is it going to lead to from this misinformation?
I want to know this police officer's warning shot. Here in America, we shoot in the air.
Correct.
Was it shooting over the guy's shoulder or something?
Well, it's a city. You can't shoot in the air because you'll hit somebody in the balcony and kill them. So you're supposed to shoot a warning shot in the ground, and is what's called an area that can absorb the bullet. So if you shoot a warning shot, and
shot it in his direction. And
no, I don't know. I don't remember the exact details. What I know is it was a mistake. It wasn't intentional. He wasn't trying to kill anybody. It's just that he chose wrong where to
discharge the weapon.
Yeah, discharge the weapon, and it led to an unfortunate death of this. I mean, unfortunate. He had 19 arrests. An 18-year-old had 19 arrests. He had been arrested more times than he had days of his years in his life,
yeah.
And he was this big of a thug. My point is, they made him into a victim. They made him into this hero. They made him into police brutality against, Black Jews. And I'm going, couldn't be farther from the truth.
Right.
So ridiculous. But what I'm saying is, and I think this is hopefully the most important thing of everything we say right now, friends, pay very diligent attention to the social media you're consuming and what people are telling you, why they're telling you what they're telling you, because we are all being played, myself included. I have to guard myself, right? And I have to question everything. And what I'm doing is and anybody who follows me, I go to the source, and I go to the people who are on the ground on any given issue in Israel that you will hear about. If it's settler brutality and violence against Arabs, or Arabs brutality against settlers, or any of those given issues, I have people on the ground that I know, that live within those vicinities, and I will try to get to. Otherwise, I'm not going to talk about it, because I know that either my camp on the right is trying to protect my side and my narrative and protect our guy, and I know that there's wrongdoing on both sides.
Yeah.
And that's just being intellectually honest.
Sure, we have to be that way, otherwise we lose all credibility.
Yes.
Let me make a big segue.
But social media is making sure that
it blurs everything.
It blurs all of that. And that's the huge danger, and that's what we're being affected by. So be aware of that, right? Russia, China, Qatar, Iran, Turkey, these are the big players. So they use the tech. The Qataris have the money. Each one is doing their part of this game. And that's what we call the Red-Green Alliance.
To just disrupt the West.
It's the Red-Green Alliance. It's the Islamists who have the oil money and everything. And then you have the Marxists.
Red communists, Red China.
Communists and socialists. And so, and just pay close attention to what's happening in the world, and you'll see it. Once you see it, you can identify it easier, and that's the thing. And just pay attention. They are uniting to destroy the West. And Israel is at the forefront of that. That's why all the criticisms are coming against Israel, because it's if we can criticize them, if we can wedge a wedge between America and Israel, or the West and Israel, then it'll be easier for us, them, the bad guys, to take over the West.
So in dividing...
That's the big picture of what it's all about.
But they're using the Gaza conflict. So
correct.
We're now 2 years into Gaza, October 7th. You guys, the IDF went into Gaza to begin systematically dismantling Hamas. Yeah. Discovered all the tunnels. So we're over 2 years into it, because we're recording this the week before Christmas of 25.
Right.
So the big accusation against Israel right now, in looking at it from outside, we would say, and I would say the collective we, all right, you got your pound of flesh. Again, you guys lost, was it 1,600 lives?
Correct. Over 600 lives.
250 hostages.
And over 920 soldiers died in this conflict, yeah.
And then 250 hostages.
Over 250 hostages.
How many came back out alive?
All except for one.
Everybody.
How many came back alive? Honestly, I don't know the number of how many living, but I think it was roughly around 70 something.
All right, so 20%.
70, 80. I could be wrong. Please
Yeah.
don't hold me on these.
Sure.
That's a fact I'd like to look out and check. Now I'm going to check myself on that.
Sure.
I just know it was. What is it? 200. I think it's 252 or 53 hostages that were taken. I forget the exact number, but it's just over 250 that were taken. How many were returned alive is a good question.
So
Yeah.
we're still you guys are still IDF. Israel is still in Gaza,
Correct.
still fighting. So the big claim right now is
We're in the defense. We're in the buffer zone. We're not in Gaza.
okay.
We're in what's known as the yellow line,
Okay.
and that's a defensive buffer zone until either, which is what Trump is trying to do. He's trying to get an international military presence that will take our posts and essentially create a peaceful, secured buffer between Israel and Gaza, is what they're proposing. In the meantime, the IDF is holding those posts, so we're not doing active missions, if you like, in fighting in Gaza anymore. Since the peace agreement
When
has
did the
been
peace agreement
brokered.
kick in?
Just a few weeks ago.
Okay.
From now.
So the statistic I pulled said something like 67 or 70,000 confirmed dead, with them
Correct.
estimating maybe 750,000 buried under rubble.
Mhm.
So this is why the international community is accusing Israel of genocide,
Correct.
which of course just means systematic and purposed annihilation of a people.
Correct.
So what is Israel? What do you say? So for the listener, you are active duty. Well, you are reserve, but you've been active duty for 500
For 2
days.
years now. Yeah.
So you've served 500 days in Gaza.
Close to 500. Yes, sir.
So boots on the ground, first tier, special operations.
We're not tier one, just to
okay.
be clear for our
Okay.
audience.
All
Yes.
right.
We're not tier one. We operate with tier one units
Okay.
as a supportive element. I would say we're probably tier 2, if you like, or tier 3. It's somewhere in between those.
Okay.
Definitely not tier 1. Just
So-
to be clear for our audience.
So what would you say?
Yeah.
Because I know Israelis will deny, no, this is not about genocide. But our point from the West is like, all right, you got your pound of flesh. What more do you want? When does this stop? I think that's the big question. When does this
Yes.
stop? And how do you answer the charge of genocide?
So those are two different questions, and I'll take the genocide one first. Have we committed a genocide in Gaza? Okay. The answer is absolutely not, because a genocide is the intentional murder and erasing of a people group because of their ethnicity and their religion. Do you know where the word genocide comes from, by the way? Let's start with that.
The Greek.
No.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yes, but it comes from when they were trying to try the Nazi war criminals. I think it was a Polish Jew had to come up with a legal term to define what was it that the Nazis were guilty of. And he came up with the term. He put it together. I forget. It's from the Latin. Put together. It's two different words. I forget the exact words from the Latin what they are. But essentially, the meaning is the erasing of an ethnic group intentionally is the bottom line of the word of what it means. And it was specifically created to define what was attempted against the Jewish people by the Nazis. Ironically, that term is being used against the Jews as if we're trying to do what the Nazis did to the Gazans. And I say it's ironic because it's actually a very specific term that was used to define and for the world to understand on a legal basis what is this anti-Semitic action? Because anti-Semitism wasn't like a legal, argument, so to speak. Oh, because of anti-Semitism, that comes later, actually, after the trials and so on.
Nuremberg.
Exactly. But essentially, it's actually genocide was the legal term, right? And so what I'm saying is, can you imagine what it feels like to have something that's taken from to specifically describe the specific discrimination of Jews and it being used against us towards our enemies who literally on October 7th were committing genocide.
Or
attempting to.
Right.
Had they had their way and have any of the Muslim world surrounding us have ever gotten their way, 48 war, 67 war, the 50s war I just skipped, the 70 war, Yom Kippur, Lebanon war, 80, list goes on. They would have If they had the ability, they would erase us today. It would be a genocide. That's a fact. We have the power to defend ourselves, and it's through that we've been able to prevent that from happening, but we don't exercise that against our enemies. What we've done in Gaza is we have targeted, to the best of our ability, the Hamas terrorists who are armed, who are posing a physical threat to Israel or to us in the combat zone, meaning either they're firing rockets into our civilian areas, and or they're engaging with us in asymmetric guerrilla warfare. They don't engage with us face to face like a classic warfare. By the way, it's very cowardice on the one hand, but it's also, it's very strategically effective. So, I mean, I take my hat off to them.
So how about if we don't even, so the charge of genocide, we'll say, look, misappropriate is like calling everything racist when nothing really is racist.
Right.
So, but we still got to account for 700,000. We'll just assume they're right. 700,000 dead, buried under rubble, rocket strikes, artillery strikes, drone strikes.
Yeah.
And the statistics, and this is all internet, so take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
That a majority of that's women and children. And you can defend it saying, I know Israel's known for their text messages and their flyers and saying, listen, this time tomorrow we're going to drone strike this whole block. But we still have casualties. So even if we eliminate the term genocide, take that off the table.
Yeah.
Because of the sensitivity of it. And it isn't, I don't believe it's what Israel's trying to do.
Well, it's not the sensitivity. I think it's just important for people to understand the context.
Yeah, and it's used on purpose.
And the fact that it's being used on purpose. And so
because it strikes at a nerve.
Exactly.
And the fact that...
And it's just offensive.
And if you guys if Israel really wanted to accomplish genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, it would have been done.
It's easy. Yeah, it's easy.
So what you guys...
Our capabilities are easy to accomplish that, if that was our goal, is what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
But I will say this, the numbers that you just gave are ridiculous. There isn't such a thing as 700,000 people under rubble. And just think of how stupid that is. The majority are women and children. The majority are women and children. Really? Have you ever fought in combat against an armed population? Have you?
Not, no.
Have any of the people who have made this claim ever had to fight armed combatives in a civilian population?
The reporters probably not.
No. The answer is no, right? Majority of these geniuses, what I call armchair experts.
Analysts, yeah.
Analysts. Okay? You don't understand warfare. War is ugly. War, innocent people die. Yes, on both sides. That's what war is. That's why nobody wants to go to war. And no one should ever go to war, because war is hell. With that said, how on earth do you think I'm able to somehow manipulate my bullets and my bombings to make sure it only takes out women and children? Do you understand how insane that statement is?
I think their point is not that you're purposely taking out women and children, but
it so happens to be it's just women and children there in the majority.
And I get it's for emotional effect.
Exactly.
It's for emotional effect.
So why they're saying women and children is for emotional effect. Is that a fact? And can that even statistically even happen? I'm asking these geniuses out there. And I'm telling you, absolutely not. That's ridiculous. That is super ridiculous. The tank shell is prejudiced towards women and children. The airstrike is prejudiced towards women and children. The IDF bullet sniper is prejudiced towards women and children. It just finds, somehow my barrel only finds women and children, but not the terrorist who's trying to kill me and kidnap me and take me into Gaza as a prisoner and a hostage so they can get more of their terrorists out of our prisons. In other words, because I was there and I can tell you what we do, we target the armed combatants, and the majority of the people who've died in this conflict that we know for as of so far, over 80% are armed combatants. And you know whose numbers that we're taking on this? Not mine, not the US. This is Hamas. So Hamas has admitted to over 80% of their warfighters have been killed in this conflict out of the 60,000+ that you mentioned that were killed. So they admit our success rate is over 80%.
Why do you trust that number? Why would
I don't. I'm just saying for argument's sake.
By their own admission,
yes, because I'm hoping after this war's over, we can somehow find out how to properly find out the truth of the matter of how many people have really been killed in this conflict and get to the bottom of it is what I'm hoping. But that's wishful thinking with terrorists. But all that to say, if you ask, I'm not an expert. I'm just a warfighter. But I have conducted conversations, and I've done an interview again on my podcast. I had John Spencer, who is internationally known as a war expert on analyzing war, analyzing conflicts, analyzing different in history, and he's pointed out repeatedly. And again, he's not a Zionist. He doesn't have a dog in this game. He's an American warfighter. He served in the army here as an officer, did his tours of duty. He's gone down range, and today he's what do you call it? Those smart people that go to and analyze and study and whatever.
Analyst.
For West Point. Okay, so he studies wars today as his job, right? Forgive me, John Spencer, if you listen to this. I'm not for butchering the titles, but the point being is he's a well-recognized scholar of war and also someone who's fought in war. And for me, I have a lot more respect for someone like him. And I interviewed him and asked him because I want to know from his perspective. He's from the outside. I'm in it. And he said, what you guys are doing is an ethical war, and that the numbers of ratio of combatant to civilian, he said, are miraculous. He said, there's nothing like this. He says, not just because our numbers dwarf the GWAT war in Afghanistan and Iraq, because your civilian casualties were nearing around 70%, and we're talking about over 1 million people that were killed in Afghanistan and Iraq.
In 20 years.
In 20 years.
Yeah.
Okay? Again, why? Because you're worse than we are? Because you're more bloodthirsty than we are? Your military? And or the NATO forces that were, because not just America that was fighting.
Yeah.
For those who are ignorant, don't understand. There was a lot of different countries
European
involved.
Countries.
Yeah. So are you guys more bloodthirsty than we are? No. It's because your enemies and my enemies are the same. They're jihadists. They use human shields. They play dirty. And they know that we have a higher moral obligation in how we conduct war, and they use it against us.
Yeah.
And they know the media is going to spin and say, look how they killed these women and children, these many women and children. And they know they can feed the lie to the media, and the media buys it because the media rather sell a head rolling down the street than tell you, oh, it was just the head of a mannequin that rolled down the street.
Yeah, what...
you follow what I'm saying?
No, a friend of mine who's in the Middle East, who is a Westerner,
yeah,
I was asking him about this, and I said, this doesn't make sense to me. He said, you don't understand, and I'm asking you for confirmation on this, Doron.
Okay.
He said, the mindset here is that there's great honor to die fighting Israel. There's a great honor. They will happily let their bodies, their children, their wives die for the cause of propaganda. Yes. Now, he's from a different Arab state than this one.
But it's true what you just said.
He said this, and I like this makes no sense to me as a Westerner.
To me as an Israeli either.
He said this is their culture. They are raised that this cause is such a worthy cause. Yeah. It's such a long-term plan that they will happily sacrifice themselves if it makes Israel or the West look bad. Women and children.
Yes, it's called jihad, and it's shahada.
What is shahada?
Shahada means to die in holy war.
Okay.
A shaheed. You guys have heard it as a shaheed or a jihadist.
Jihadist.
Okay. But to be a shaheed for them is the ultimate honor. That's true, because it's the only guarantee for the afterlife as a Muslim is if you die in holy war. So that's the kind of the unfortunate, sad reality of Islam, theologically speaking, is that me as a Muslim, I have no guarantee of the afterlife other than dying in holy war. So what happens is that the terrorists, and usually the masterminds behind the ones that carry out terrorists, so the scholars within the Islamic world, the Muslim Brotherhood, and those guys those are the elitists, those are the smart people. they're the learned ones. They're the ones that go to university and Harvard and Yale. I mean, these are really, high-end, smart people. But they take Islam and they take jihad that's found within the Quran and they highlight it for the masses within their sphere of influence, where they're preaching it in mosques and what have you, and preaching jihad. And they're looking for candidates that are oppressed, that have lost face in the culture because of either sickness or because they're not wealthy, or because of a bunch of different social norms and what have yous, and they look for a victim, in other words, who will be willing to lose it all to regain it all. And the way you can regain it is if you become a shaheed, male or female, doesn't matter. If you become a shaheed, your family is going to regain their honor, you're going to get money, and you're going to be well-to-do for the rest of your life. You'll never have to worry about your family honor ever again. You'll have squares with the names of your daughter or your son that blew themselves up or carried out a terrorist attack and died as a shaheed. Do you understand? People don't understand this. It's part of their culture, which is very, very sad. It's a death cult.
Yeah,
and
I've heard that term many times.
It literally is. And like you said, they'd rather, it's the greatest honor for them that one of theirs would die in holy war, in jihad, what's known as jihad, than for them to live, as doctors or lawyers or whatever. It's a great honor. And you know what? My prayer and hope is for the Muslim world that you look at the Bundi attack in Australia and look at that wonderful hero Muslim that went and charged one of the Muslim attackers that was carrying out a jihadist attack. He is a true hero for Islam. And this is my challenge to the Islamic world. Make him the hero. Make him the one that stood up against the jihadists. If you truly don't believe, because the majority of Muslims in the world do not believe in jihad, thank God. But for those of you who are the majority, why don't you make that guy a hero? Make him the hero of your community so that young men and women who grow up within Islam would rather become that man than the one that was carrying the gun and shooting innocent people.
That guy got shot 5 times, like wrestling that guy. I guess he got shot point blank, shot 5 times wrestling that rifle.
And you know what?
Crazy.
I want to shake his hand.
Yeah, I'd shake his hand too.
God bless that man. God bless that man, and may he come with a speedily recovery, and get all the honor that is due to him as a hero in Australia. So I think that's just important for people to understand. I think we.
Yeah. You were telling me, we were driving, or maybe it was when we were FaceTiming last week, you were telling me about clearing buildings in Gaza and every other building being a weapons cache or having tunnels.
That's a fact, yes.
Like every other building.
Almost every other building on statistic has weapon caches, booby traps, talk about women and children. I know of one of our special forces units that this is firsthand account of a soldier that was in that unit. And he tells of how he saw a woman and a boy leaving a house that they were just about to search for weapons and so on. And they left them alone, of course, because they weren't unarmed. They weren't supposed to be there. It's the battle space. So technically it was an infraction, because remember you were talking about how we warned them ahead of time and so on. So they weren't supposed to be there. And we don't want them there because they're civilians. We don't want them where we're operating, of course, right? We don't want them to get in the crossfire. So they ignored them and they're like, okay, you shouldn't be here. And probably they even screamed at them, like, get the hell out of here. What are you doing here, right? I would, angrily, because you're endangering your life, right? As I'm trying to get after the bad guys, and you know full well you shouldn't be here.
Right.
And trust me, they know. People will come up with excuses that, they just didn't hear. Trust me, they know. They all know. How do I know? Open up a food distribution site and watch how many tens of thousands of Palestinians, Arabs come flooding like a swarm, so that they can find, but
they can't stay away from battle zone.
Yeah, come on, man. And again, I've been operating in there, so I'm observing things from the outside, and I can see when they want to do something, when they don't want to do something. Okay, like this is based off of like facts, with all due respect, not my fictitious thinking and armchair quarterbacking. Long story short, they left the building, the soldiers went in, and lo and behold, would you believe, the building was rigged to go, but because probably the woman or the kid, one of the two, weren't proficient enough and trained enough to know how to close the wires, it was literally just one of the wires wasn't fastened properly, and therefore the booby trap did not go off, and the whole team did not just get annihilated. But you see, we risk our lives to carry out these operations instead of just doing another airstrike, another artillery strike, or a tank or whatever, and just take that building out, and we're not going to risk it. But we risk our lives to search house to house, not just for their sake, but also for our sake. Because we have hostages in there, right? Not anymore, they're living, but that was one side of it. The other side of it is I don't want the death of that boy or that woman on my conscience who happened to be in that building that we just struck. So it's way more than you think. And I'll give you another example. When we were operating, and this is firsthand account, this is stories. My team goes in to do our mission somewhere in Gaza, and we go into to meet with one of the units inside, and I go into one of the houses, and I look, and I'm like, what in the world? There's a family of 7 here, like a man and a wife and their 5 kids. And I asked the soldiers, why are they here? Oh yeah, they decided they'd rather come to us than to go to the humanitarian corridor that was created, because they said that the husband is claiming that Hamas is trying to kill him, and he rather chooses fate with the terrible genocidal IDF soldiers, right, than his fate with Hamas. And the soldiers were bitter and angry because they're young kids too, so they don't have years of experience and understanding and some compassion for this father. I do as a father of 4 kids. Yeah. So he's got 1 kid more than me. So I completely understand his desperation. And so, but
why did he think Hamas wanted to kill him?
Well, I don't know. And that's what he claimed. And so as being a collaborator, they try to kill each other all the time. For anybody who's been listening, the culture is a tribal culture, and there's always going to be war because there's always going to be tribes that are going to want to kill each other. That's the Middle East.
Within the Arabs.
Yes. That's what they say.
Yeah.
They say we'll always have war. If the Jews aren't here, we kill each other. I'll give you an example. We'll get back to that one. Another example. So Tzvi Cheskeli, who's one of our well-known undercover operatives that used to work deep undercover to counter terrorism, he's in there undercover one day within the one of the terrorist groups, and he observed as he's within their culture, right, that there was shots fired, people killing each other, and he goes, "What the heck was that all about?" After the aftermath. Oh, nothing. It's just the neighbors fighting over the parking spot. He goes, so they just killed their neighbor over a parking spot? He goes, and the guy tells him, you don't understand. For us, this is tribal. Of course he will kill him over a parking spot. It's about my honor. It's about this is my place and standing for mine, getting mine. So of course he killed him. It was an of course. It wasn't a question of, oh yeah, that might have been extreme. That's normal. Muslim against Muslim.
Over tribal lines.
Over parking lot in an urban city so it goes from tents and Bedouins and whatever to now we have cities and now we have parking lots. And it's over whose car gets to be parked there. I will kill you for it. It's a culture you guys don't understand here in the West. You'll never understand it. I don't want you to understand it. You shouldn't, or accept it, I guess, or right? Like that's not normal, but it is our normal. And that's the context within which we find ourselves trying to pursue democracy, trying to pursue God, trying to pursue righteousness, trying to pursue all the things that we try to do as a nation, as Israelis, and integrating all these different cultures and worldviews that are vastly contrasted one from each other. But back to the family. So I asked the soldiers, I said, they said, we're angry, and I said, what are you angry about? Like what's that? Hey kid, what, like, calm down, man. What's the deal? because you could tell they were venting, and they're like, "This really ticks me off." I said, "What?" Now, because of them, we have to share our war rations with them, and so we're low on food thanks to the 5 more mouths to feed that weren't on the roster. And I go, "Nah, I hear you, man. That sucks." And trust me, anybody who's been in combat, we're talking about MREs. Now, what you have as an MRE is a luxury of 5 times above our MREs. Our MREs is a can of tuna, a can of corn, and canned basics of other things like that. We don't get mac and cheese. We don't get
beef stew,
and stroganoff and all that stuff.
Coffee and chocolate.
And all that in your MRE, all right? So our MRE is very raw and basic, and you imagine like you're living on MREs that already as a warfighter here in America on the pampered version of MRE, that sucks. Trust me, you eat it enough, it also sucks. But imagine that sucks. Imagine it sucks more if you get one of our MREs.
And you got to share it.
And now you have to share it. You have to share those calories. I'm doing guard duty. I'm fully. I got armor on me. I'm losing sleep. All this stuff. They just sit there and are just under our protection.
For how long?
Until they got processed. I don't know what happened afterwards, but they were there for days. And like I said, they were bitter. And they said, yeah, the general that's in charge of this area told our commander, we have to keep eye on them, and there's nothing to do about it right now. And carry on, in other words, and embrace the stuff. More than that, it's another guard post, right? Again, if you don't understand warfare and you've never been downrange, you don't understand what I'm talking about. But when you have 4 posts to guard and you have X amount of men, and you're doing back-to-back guard duty, and then I throw in one more for you because all of a sudden there's a prisoner that you end up with, right? Let's say that's a 5th posting, and that's 1/5 less sleep for everybody else. In this case, we're also talking about X, however you want to do the math of how much food less you're going to get and whatever. Again, these soldiers aren't starving. But they're just pissed.
Yeah.
And rightfully so.
And they're cranky.
But that's the why.
So
and my question is, would you guys do that here in America, in Europe, and whatever? Are you that much better than us, so to speak? And first of all, from my personal, I can even answer that because my personal engagement with warfighters in America and in Europe and so on a personal level, I can tell you that it's either going to be equal, like the same, but definitely not, you wouldn't do better than us, so to speak, on a moral level. And I think a perfect example of that to give people like a movie example that is from a real story is The Lone Survivor. The dilemma they had with the goat herder, do we hang on to him?
We kill him.
Or do we release him? Or they said, we'll kill him. I don't think that's what they said, by the way, because I don't think you're allowed to do that. Again, I could be wrong. I think that was just Hollywood trying to make it more extreme and more dramatic.
I read the book.
And they said they wanted to kill him?
I think they were going to shoot them all, yeah.
Maybe, okay, see, we would never do that. We would never do that.
These were SEALs deep in Taliban territory.
That's not even a question. You never kill them.
I could be wrong. It's been a long time since I read Lone Survivor.
I just have a hard time believing that they would do that. But again, that's my worldview.
Yeah.
We would never kill them. That's not even negotiable.
Then maybe I'm wrong on the book. I got it.
I hope so.
It's one of those Navy SEAL books that.
Correct. Yeah, by Marcus Luttrell.
Yeah.
From Texas. So point being is that's a living example for you, and I'm telling you that's not acceptable for me, and in my military that is not okay. Rather, we did what they showed in the movie that they could have done as an alternative is just tie him up and hang on to him until the mission's over, is what we would have done, by the way. I can tell you that's almost for sure. And look, that's what we did with this family. We chose rather to do guard duty over them, make sure they're fine and whatever, and not, because we could have just said, let them go, and tough luck. If you're afraid to die from the hands of Hamas or whatever, you're not our problem. Okay, why you're not my leave from here is what we could have said, but we didn't.
What about the charges of starvation, the purpose and intentional starvation of Gaza?
that's another sore subject that's been popularized and just spun out of control by the media.
I saw the video of that real scrawny kid.
Oh, it's terrible.
But then the mother is fat as a hog.
Exactly.
Like, all right, if this 10-year-old kid is starving to death,
how
mama's eating all his food.
Right,
But then we
terrible.
Then we finally saw a follow-up, because I think it was New York Times did that, and they were totally egg on their face.
Correct.
Because this kid has had a genetic condition his whole life.
Exactly.
And it's not a starvation case at all.
Correct. So, but the question still remains, was there and is there starvation in Gaza? And the answer is yes. The short answer. Let's give context. Israel allows over 4,000 calories a day to enter Gaza through humanitarian convoys daily. Listen again, everybody. Over 4,000 calories a day.
Per person.
You're an athletic individual, right?
I would be fat as a cow if I had 4,000 calories a day.
But you're athletic,
yes,
right? How many calories do you need as an athlete? I mean, you do some extreme sports stuff, and you know guys that do extreme sports stuff. Do you need 4,000 calories and as extreme, let's say a CrossFitter. Do you need 4,000 calories as a CrossFitter?
Maybe if you're in competition season.
How much do you need on average as a CrossFitter, would you say your daily calorie intake would be? For your typical athlete.
I would say 3,500 to 3,800 if you want to start to lose weight.
Okay, max. Like we're talking. So you're telling me, and that's an athlete, you're burning calories. So let's talk about someone who doesn't. You're just sitting on the couch and whatever. How many calories do you think you need to survive?
1,000.
Maybe 1,000, maybe 2, right? Let's say 2, half of that, right? So point being is, on half of that, you can survive comfortably.
Yeah.
Comfortably.
Sitting around doing nothing.
So you're telling me that the folks in Gaza cannot survive with 4,000 calories when an extreme athlete who burns thousands of calories daily through exercise, extreme exercise, doesn't even need that amount of calories that you're getting, and somehow they're starving? And here's the answer why. That's how much is going in. Who causes the starvation? Again, to use a movie reference, I hate to, but again, it's the closest I can get you to understand and see my world. Black Hawk Down, the opening scene. I love the opening scene because it's like, I'm like, because I remember rewatching it lately and with all these claims, and then me never noticing or paying attention to the opening scene and little statements. Yeah, and you're just kind of like, oh, okay. But I remember seeing it again fresh after October 7 and all these claims. I go, that's it. Ridley Scott nailed it. Like, that's the narrative that Israel should be telling the world, because that's exactly what's happening. So just like in Mogadishu, the terrorists were taking the humanitarian aid coming from the United Nations and other help groups and Red Cross and whatnot, and they would take it and they would seize it and they would keep it from the people. And Ridley Scott's, he's explaining the context, and you see on the screen, and it says, and they're using it as a weapon they're using starvation as a weapon against the people. And I would go, yes, that's Hamas. That's Hamas. Just change that opening scene with Hamas guys with green ribbons on their head, shooting and mowing people down. That's literally what they're doing. They seize the trucks. They shoot people dead. I mean, if you saw some of the stuff that comes out of Gaza, like actual brutality.
Hamas killing their own people.
It's so brutal. It's so mean. It twists my stomach when I watch the footage that I've seen, and I'm going, God.
Give a lesser version.
God, what they're doing to people.
What Hamas does to their own people. Or whatever just comes to mind.
I'll tell you, but it's hard for me to even talk about it.
And we're running. All right. Well, we're running out of time.
I'm thinking of the footage. It's terrible. They will grab and they'll pull your leg like this. Yeah, they'll pull on and they'll hold you down, and they take a brick and they start throwing the brick on to break your kneecap, opposite direction, or their shins with batons, and you'll just see them going pow pow, and the guy's screaming like stop, and they won't, and they just keep going and they keep going until they break every bone. In the worst cases I've seen, they'll break both their legs and both their arms, so that basically they're gonna die because they can't walk away, they can't feed themselves, they can't do nothing. They are laying there in a pool of broken bones and blood to die.
And that's what Hamas does to
themselves, to their own
Arab
people. Why? Because he and what they claim, and you'll hear him, screaming, he's a collaborator with Israel. He collaborated with Israel. It doesn't matter that the claim is false or true. It could be. I don't know. What I can tell you is this: they don't care. They use that to justify their violence against each other because they want to instill violence and fear from them. I carry the biggest stick. I'm the one that you have to come through for food, for sustenance, and for everything, and you need to support Hamas. You need to support our cause or else. So why is there munitions in every home? Why are there girls' bedrooms with a tear tunnel going down under her bed? Why are mosques and schools and churches being used as
because they don't want their legs broken.
Exactly. So in other words, the people support Hamas not willingly and not wantingly, but because if they don't, that's their end. And or they'll starve you. They won't give you the food. So that's the sad reality. So Israel makes sure all those resources get in there. It's not just Israel, by the way. We've been collaborating with the international community, with Jordan and other countries, America, European countries, done airdrops, truck convoys in and out. And I've seen them because I'm a special mobility unit. So all our missions are special, not all of them are special to be honest, but we do every mission you can imagine that's mobility focused. And I've seen thousands and thousands of trucks because we'll pass by we've passed by multiple times where they've trucked the truckloads of food into Gaza. And I remember telling my team, I wish I could film this because the world doesn't believe us.
Yeah.
But I can't film it because I'm doing a mission. But I'm like, I so want to just film this and make you all eat your heart out and say, really? Look at the thousands of trucks lined up here. There's another one going in, another one going in, another. It's like, point being is there's so much food going into Gaza. It's ridiculous. I mean, they can choke on the food. There's so much going in there.
But Hamas chokes down the distribution.
Yep. Hamas chokes down the distribution. And so all I'm saying is if there is starvation in Gaza, there isn't mass starvation. But for where there is starvation, it's because Hamas won't allow those people, for whatever reasons, to get their daily rations and starve them. And it's terrible.
Thank you for sitting down with us, try to bring some clarity to this. How can we pray for Israel and the people of Gaza?
Yeah. I would say pray for Israel that's under immense pressure internationally because of misinformation, because of people that just don't understand the context. And that just puts unnecessary pressure on our prime minister and on our leadership, of course. Pray for the Gazans to be freed from Hamas. That's my prayer every time I went in with my team and I'm seeing the devastation, I'm seeing the destruction as the fruit of what Hamas has done by taking full control of Gaza. Over 600 miles of tear tunnels underneath a land space that's 42 kilometers long and anywhere between 8 to 12 kilometers wide.
600 miles of tunnels.
Let that sink in.
That's a lot of digging.
Yeah. So in other words, they've invested that much more resources underground
than they did in their own people.
And so pray that they will be liberated from this death cult.
Yeah.
They're robbing these children from their futures. They're robbing them from having a childhood that's carefree. That's carefree. Just go and play and have fun. All of that these kids don't have that grow up in Gaza. And then unfortunately, on my end, the only thing they see from their neighbor is a military force that is forced to come in there to defend ourselves. And then they see us as the bad guy as well. And I understand it. And it's terrible. And so my heart is, first and foremost, it's to defend my people. Absolutely. But I'm also really wanting to see the people of Gaza liberated from this tyranny, And the world needs to help us to let us just do our job, destroy Hamas, and liberate the Gazans from that tyranny. And that's my prayer for them. That's my prayer for them / for us, because it benefits us both. And I pray for a revival. I pray that for you, the church here in America and globally, for me, the only solution for the Gazans is that they receive the gospel of Jesus Christ. Okay? Like for y'all missionaries out there, please come and missionize the Gazans is what I'm asking you.
Amen.
You know, because I believe that the fruit that I've seen through Musab Hassan Yusuf, the son of Hamas, also known as the Green Prince.
The one that got born again.
He got born again, a born again Christian, and today he's a transformed human being. He's an incredible voice of hope, of light, and he'll tell you everything I've said, but even he'll speak way harsher about his own people than I will ever. And he's just speaking truth in his heart. And this is a person that I see is the fruit of what happens when you get something that is positive. And I think Christianity is the positive answer to the Middle East, and definitely for the Gazans who are under this tyrannical, jihadist, religious worldview that they have. And I think that's the solution, in my opinion, because I know that the Jewish people, we can get along with Christians. We have a lot more in common than we do with the Muslim world. And for me, that's my prayer, actually, for them.
Well, thank you. Again, we got to get you to the airport.
Sir.
God bless you, sir.
God bless you.
I want to tackle a very complex, very sensitive subject today, and that is what we might call a Christian's perspective on modern Israel. We are recording this at the end of 2025, approximately 26 months after October 7th, when Hamas terrorists infiltrated southern Israel along the Gaza Strip and committed the most heinous atrocities of probably the last 10 or 15 years. And at the beginning, much of the world supported Israel in their retribution and their military action against Hamas and their incursions into Gaza in an attempt to extract all their POWs. But pretty quickly, there became protests around the world, flamed by who knows what, calling for a free Palestine. So I want to try to address how we as Christians, how we as born-again believers, New Testament saints, should be viewing Israel today. And I will say, as a full disclosure, I am not one of these, what I might call super pro-Israel people. That's not to say I'm anti-Semitic, not in the least bit. I'm just not somebody who, in our church, we fly a Christian flag, we fly an American flag, we don't fly an Israeli flag. But that being said, I teach very heavily out of the Old Testament. I support the Old Testament. I have what do I have? I've got a mezuzah, I've got a shofar, I've got a Hanukkah, a menorah for Hanukkah. I've got a lot of the Christian accoutrements that speak to Israel and are pro-Israel, but I'm not one of these guys that's just super, super pro-Israel. I guess my stance is I call balls and strikes when it comes to modern day Israel, and I'm not of the mindset they can do no wrong. That gets into a bigger discussion on what kind of theology you might have concerning Israel. Are you a dual covenant theologian or theology, or do you have a replacement theology? Dual covenant says there's one covenant for the Jews and then one covenant for the Gentiles, and that basically implies the Jews don't have to be born again. They just keep the law, which is impossible to do today because there is no temple or priesthood as of yet. And then the Gentiles must be born again. I reject that. The other spectrum, end of the spectrum, says replacement theology, which means the church has replaced Israel and that God is now doing everything through the church and God is not doing anything with Israel. I'm not there on that end of the spectrum. We might find a happy medium somewhere in between. So we also have this concept now in America among the younger generation who seem to get all their information from the echo chamber of the hollow thing called YouTube that keeps feeding them rhetoric. You have one aspect that has become very anti-Semitic, and everything is, quote, the Jews. And that's an ignorant statement in and of itself, and I'll explain that in a minute. So you have those that are anti-Semitic who are against Israel, who along with everybody in the Middle East, do not think the Jews, whoever they are, which we'll explain, have a right to exist, and they see a Jewish cabal, a Jewish conspiracy everywhere they shake a stick. That's one end of the spectrum. The other end, as I just said, is Israel can do no wrong. So one end of the spectrum is the Jews have no right to exist. The other end is the Jews can do no wrong. All of this needs qualifying. All of us needs serious qualification. So I pulled a bunch of statistics, and I want to share those, and then we're going to read a passage out of Galatians and then a passage out of Romans, probably a lot of Romans chapter 11. We are seeing a resurgence of anti-Semitism, and I want to say first and foremost, Christians have no permission hating anybody. We're called to hate sin. We're called to love people, to preach the gospel to them, to pray for the peace, yes, of Israel, yes, the peace of Jerusalem, but to pray peace in every country. We want peace in Russia. We want peace in Ukraine. We want peace in North Korea. We want everybody to come to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. So for any Christian, especially a young man, to get drunk, addicted to the doom loop of YouTube videos and allow hate to incubate in their heart, they prove they don't have a fellowship with Jesus Christ like they should. So we're dealing with the resurgence of anti-Semitism, and it's flaring up. It's just trendy. I view this present resurgence of anti-Semitism a lot like the old BLM movement from 5 years ago, where all of a sudden it was down with the white man, whitey is no good, and your white privilege, take it and shove it, and the black community can do no wrong. The new spirit is not BLM. That thing died out when all of their fundraisers were proved to be corrupt. Now we have anti-Semitism in that down with the Jews have no right, and they're trying to take over the world. How are we as modern Christians to view, address, support, or even oppose Israel? And I guess we need to start by looking at the present-day geopolitics of Israel. This is going to be a nutshell. I do not claim to be an expert on the geopolitics of Israel. I have been to the Middle East twice. I've spent time in Saudi Arabia. I've spent time in Jordan. I've spent some time in Turkey. I'll be back in some of those places this year or the coming year. It gives you a perspective other than middle-class white America or American Christianity. So many of us, evangelicals, Protestants, when we view Israel, we have a biblical historical lens with which, when we think of Israel, we still think of Israel in sandals. We still think of Israel in tents. We still think of Israel in stone buildings. We still think of Israel riding camels and donkeys. We still think of Israel like we do Palm Sunday. And we forget that it is a modern nation and one of the world superpowers, to be honest. We're going to show pictures here. If you're streaming the audio, what we're showing at this point are pictures of modern-day Haifa, modern-day Joppa, modern-day Tel Aviv, modern-day Jerusalem. And we can see from these pictures that Israel is a modern nation. And what we often think of is the old city of Jerusalem, which cobblestones, you're looking for people to come riding through on a donkey, waving palms on Palm Sunday. And there is that in the old city, and it's preserved for the historicity of it and for the Christian pilgrimages, but that's not modern-day Israel. And that complicates things in how we should view and see Israel. We cannot hold Israel to an old covenant theocracy like they had under the Davidic monarchs, or even northern Israel with all of its kings. We can't hold it to that. That has all been resolved in Christ. The temple was destroyed. The Jews who are practicing Jews can't make sacrifices for this sin because they have no temple. And because they have no temple, they have no need of a priesthood. And all of that kind of gave way into rabbinical Judaism now and the synagogue system, which is the primary place. But it also answers why they are so passionate to rebuild the temple, not the least of which is that it's prophesied that there will be a temple that will be God's temple. And then the Antichrist will defile that with what Daniel and the Gospels call the abomination desolation. But I want to go through some statistics. We've got to make sure we bring our view and perspective of Israel up out of the first century and bring it into modernity. We cannot forget that Israel is a modern world power. And we have to also keep in mind that present-day geopolitics complicates everything. So let me give you some statistics. This year in 2025, Israel will touch a population of 10 million. Israel is a very small strip of land. If you know your world geography, as a Christian, I would think you're familiar with the map of Israel. And they just hit 10 million citizens, not 10 million Jews. And maybe at this point we make a distinction. When the anti-Semites and the people that feed on YouTube videos, by the way, when you get all your information from somebody that asks you to like and subscribe, because that's how they make their money, with you liking and subscribing, you probably have a very shallow information pool. So go a little deeper than that. Visit news organizations, AP, Jerusalem Post, BBC, Al Jazeera. Read Jerusalem news, read Al Jazeera news, read all the news you can get around the area. Don't just stay with some talking head podcasting out of a basement who needs you to like and subscribe so they can make their paycheck, right? That's insane that we're getting our news from people who request us to like and subscribe them. Do better. If we hear that they've clicked over to 10 million and we want to describe, well, what's 10 million people? Are these the Jews? Or is the conspiratorial cabal of Jews, what are those Jews? I hear the conspiracy that, the Jews run the porn industry. Okay, are those practicing Jews? Are those Hasidic Jews? Are those Orthodox Jews? Are those ultra-Orthodox Jews? Or are they people of Jewish descent who happen to have the last name that ends in Berg or Steen, and they happen to have it in Hollywood? To be honest with you, if you do research, our porn industry in America was started by a very devout Methodist, or I should say a man raised in a very devout Methodist home, and that was Hugh Hefner with Playboy. And then you had Larry Flynt, the famous owner of Hustler magazine. He got born again through, I think it was President Gerald Ford's sister, and was promising to turn things around, but he really didn't, but he kept pushing Hustler magazine. Our porn industry was not birthed by Jewish people or people of Jewish descent. The other complaint is, well, the Jews control Hollywood. Okay, you mean like Spielberg or Cohen, the Cohen brothers? Are these practicing Jews or just people who have a Jewish heritage? Or they control the academies, the academics, they control the business world, they control what? Is this a cabal of practicing Jews who are Torah observant, or are they just people of Jewish descent who happen to have a rich heritage because they come from two-parent homes who've taught them to be successful, who've taught them to budget, who've taught them to be educated and to be proactive. And so they just spread out everywhere and they prosper, much like Nigerians do in my experience, specifically the Igbo tribe, much like maybe your Russians are very proactive. And every culture has its stereotype that lends itself to something. What we've got to do is start to recognize when we start hearing this term of the Jews, you ought to ask that person, okay, who are they? And what do you mean by the Jews? Because even that term alone sounds racist. Because could we say the blacks? Them Mexicans? Why is it acceptable to say the Jews? And I'm telling you, I'm not a super pro-Israel minister. I want to go there one day. I've been on the banks of the Jordan River. I've seen Israel, flown over Israel. I've seen Israel from Saudi Arabia. I've seen Israel from Jordan, seen Eilat there, the southernmost city. I have a kindred spirit with Israel because that's where our faith was birthed. But I'm not one of these people that's going to do a Passover Seder at Easter time for my church and wave an Israeli flag and wear a yarmulke and a prayer shawl. That's not my kind of Messianic Judaism that we do. We do Christianity here. But I'm hearing more and more rhetoric that's anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, and it's unbiblical, it's ungrounded. So let's back up and visit what's 10 million people in Israel? What's that look like before we start trying to decipher the Jewish cabal that's trying to take over the world? So 10 million citizens, 2% are migrant workers and asylum seekers, primarily from Asia and Africa. That kind of blew my mind to think that there's a lot of Africans, Black Africans, Northern Africans in Israel. You have 1.5% Druze, D-R-U-Z-E, a minority group, formerly Muslim, kind of an Arabic, but an Arabic ethnic group. The Druze, that's a major minority and an important minority you'll read a lot about when you study the demographics of Israel. You have less than 2% are actually Christians, Aramaeans and Masoretes. You have 17% are Muslim, that are Arabs, and you have different types of Muslims at that. You have Palestinian Muslims and Arabs, Israeli Arabs, and For what it's worth, Israeli Arabs don't identify as Palestinian Arabs. So yes, there are Arabs, and they are identified as Israeli Arabs. They're not necessarily Jews. A lot of Arabs are Christians. A large part of your Christian population is an Arab Christian population, but they don't identify as a Palestinian Arab, whether it's Gaza in the south or West Bank to the north and the east. So it's complex. And then we have 71% Jews. But what's interesting with that number is 71% Jews, but you have different flavors of Judaism. You have Sephardic, Ashkenazi, Mizrahi, Karaite, Ben Israel, Kohen, and then Beta Israel. So there's about 6 or 7, Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox, Hasidic. There's all these different types of Jews who practice Judaism in different ways, like we have so many different denominations representing Christianity here in America. So again, when we talk about the Jews, when your anti-Semitic uncle talks about the Jews, when your anti-Semitic college son talks about the Jews, ask him which flavor. Does he even know? Or is he just listening to YouTube? Among the Jews, we have 25% are Israeli Jews, 14% are Levant Jews, 12% are African Jews, another 11% are Russian and Ukrainian Jews, a little under 10% are European Jews, a little under 9% are Asian Jews. I did not know there was such thing as Asian Jews. You have 2.3% that are American Jews. And then you have 2.2% in the population are Bedouins. And these are Arab people that are really somewhat nomadic, and they live out in the deserts, probably down in the Negev. Then you have 1.8% are Eastern Christians. And then 1.4%, and this blew my mind, 1.4% are Latino Jews. So a very diverse melting pot. In fact, it was described in our interview that Israel is a very rich melting pot. So now when we talk about the Jews, please tell me which ones we're talking about. Even more complicating is what percentage of the Jewish population in Israel is religious. This is important if we're going to try to hold Israel to the responsibility of the Mosaic Law, because like in America, we call ourselves, quote, the Christian nation. Even though our politicians and our academics reject that term, the rest of the world still sees us as the Christian nation. So we developed that reputation from somewhere. But we all know as believers, just because we call ourselves the Christian nation doesn't mean we're actually practicing Christianity. So in Israel, you have what are called culturally Jewish people who are Jewish by culture, but they're not, but we call it cultural Christianity as our extension of that. And then you have those who are strictly religious. Here in America, we'd say, are you a cultural Christian or are you a real Christian? So they have the same thing in Israel, cultural Jews or real Jews who practice and are Torah observant. And to that end, only about 1/3 of Israeli Jews are practicing Torah observant Jews. 1/3. That is about the same population, same percentage as America. America is roughly 40%. 44% of Protestants are practicing in America, or approximately 20 to 30% of all U.S. Christians are practicing. So it depends on how you want to run the statistics. So if we want to stop and consider this, statistically speaking, Israel is considered the Jewish state, the United States is considered the Christian nation, and they're about as religiously practicing as we are. So let that sink in. You and I as Christians know our nation is descending rapidly, and we don't live up to the Christian expectations of our forefathers. Israel is in the same boat. The current statistics I just pulled this week, the most current data, and this is even after October 7th, is saying that only about 1/3 of Israeli Jews are practicing. 62% of Americans identify as Christian, and yet only 1/3 of those attend a service at least once a month. Only 1/3 of those who confess Christianity attend service once a month. This is why our nation is sinking. 44% of Protestants are practicing, 20-30% of all U.S. Christians are practicing. So what we're seeing is a very similar situation. Now, this answers a lot for me when I try to judge the modern day Israel in light of the Mosaic Law. And I recognize they are not They're not a monarchy. They're a democratic republic of sorts. They have a democracy. They have a Knesset, which is like a House of Representatives. They have a prime minister. They parallel very much Western democracy and Western governments. And yes, they are the Jewish state, but they are a diverse state with Muslims and Christians and Arabs and Jews and Armenians and Aramaeans and Druze and Yazidis and all sorts of people, Africans and Ethiopians and Egyptians. There's so much going on there that the world has recognized them as a nation, and as a nation, they have a right to defend themselves. So then the question comes, and I'm going to probably have to make this a two-part teaching here, is how are we to view them biblically? We said theologically, you've got the dual covenant concept or the replacement theology concept. I reject both of those today. I could study one or the other and maybe be convinced one direction or the other. And I believe it's somewhere in between. I like finding the tension and the mystery in certain theologies, that it's not an either or, but a both and. And Paul says something very similar in Romans chapter 11. Let's read there. Romans chapter 11, I'll be reading the New Living Translation. He said in verse 1, actually we'll back up in chapter 10, verse 21. He said, "But regarding Israel, God said, all day long I opened my arms to them, but they were disobedient and rebellious." So Paul says Israel is all day disobedient and rebellious. What does God say about Israel? Disobedient and rebellious. Chapter 10 is all about the Gentiles finding Christ and being opened up to the commonwealth of Israel, the blessings of Abraham, and being grafted in. Chapter 11 concludes with the same parallel of being grafted in. So then chapter 11 begins by saying, "I ask then, has God rejected his own people, the nation of Israel? Of course not." If we stopped right there, we would have to acknowledge by that verse alone, God has not rejected the nation of Israel at all. This would seem to be why there's a special something about the Israeli people, the Jewish people, however you want to parse it or ethnically describe it. You have to admit, going back to the Exodus, 4,000 or so years ago, you've got a people who have been through empires and have been under slavery and have been dispersed and have been carried off into Assyria and carried down into Egypt and carried into Babylon. And yet they've come back, and then they were oppressed by the Macedonians and oppressed by the Romans, oppressed by the Greeks, and then dispersed all over Europe. And yet they're still here to this day. You can't show me anybody from the Ottoman Empire. You can't show me anybody from the Assyrian Empire or the Babylonian Empire or the Egyptian Empire. You can't show me anybody from these empires, but the Jewish people still exist, still adhering to the same religious book that has built Western civilization. They still observe the same scriptures that Jesus Christ was teaching out of. You don't find any religion like that was a nation state. Islam developed its Quran, borrowing from both Christianity and Judaism, but it was never a nation state. It was a religious system that spread to the populations around the Mediterranean, but never a nation, never a people, the nation of Israel, as the Bible calls them. He says, "I myself am an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham, and a member of the tribe of Benjamin." Verse 2, "No, God has not rejected his own people, whom he chose from the very beginning." How do we view the Israeli people, the Jewish people? We have to affirm the Bible's teaching because we're Bible believers. This is our faith. God has not rejected them. That doesn't mean they get a free pass, but we just affirm what the Bible says. God has not rejected his own people. It's why they still exist. It's why there is this hand of God upon them. That does not mean they don't have to be born again. Jesus Christ taught the Pharisees, the religious leaders of his day, you must be born again. Paul goes on to make the same arguments here, that they were torn out, but we were grafted in, and if we stand by faith, we'll remain. But if we lose our faith, and they gain faith, they'll be grafted in, we'll be torn out. Verse 2 again, "No, God has not rejected his own people, whom he chose from the very beginning." And then I'm going to jump down to verse 5. "It is the same today, for a few of the people of Israel have remained faithful because of God's grace, his undeserved kindness in choosing them. And since it is through God's kindness, then it is not by their good works, for in that case, God's grace would not be what it is in reality, free and understood. Verse 7. So this is the situation. And I like this verse because it summarizes the condition. This is the situation. Here's where we got to be clear with our Jewish theology. Most of the people of Israel have not found the favor of God they are looking for so earnestly. That favor would be the grace of God for salvation. But we could just say the favor of God. There's no doubt there's the favor of God on this tiny nation, because when every Arab state around them wants to see their eradication, they just keep keeping on. You can't squish them. You can't eradicate them. They live under the threat of constant terrorism. They are not a perfect people. And as we've said, only a third of them even observe the law of their God. And that's a third of the Jews. That's only 70% of the population. Yet you cannot deny that there is some kind of favor on the Israeli people, the Jewish people, which that alone would say, I'm not going to oppose what God is in favor of. If at the very least, I'm going to go over here and pray for all nations, including Israel, because I want everybody to be born again. Why would I oppose what God is favoring? They may not be favored with salvation according to Paul's definition of grace out of the New Living Translation, but why would I want to put my hand against them? That doesn't mean they're perfect. The Jews have never been perfect, but you know what? Neither is America, the Christian nation. And going back to that concept of maybe this Jewish cabal running pornography, this Jewish cabal running Hollywood, this Jewish cabal running the institutions, the solution is really easy. If you think there's a Jewish cabal trying to poison our people, to be honest, we don't need help. If you want to resist the Jewish cabal that runs the porn industry, quit watching porn. Quit watching Hollywood movies. Don't send your kids to a university if you think there's this giant Jewish cabal to take over the world. Back to the scripture, though. Most of the people of Israel have not found the favor of God they're looking for so earnestly. Now, we already are setting ourselves into a mystery. Anytime there's a tension in scripture, Paul seems to call that a mystery. It's a mystery because there's a tension, what we might call in modern language, a contradiction. What's the contradiction? God's not rejected his own people, but his people haven't found favor. So the contradiction is he hasn't rejected them, but he hasn't really received them and given them the salvation they were looking for. In fact, Paul calls it a mystery over later in the passage. Let me see if I can find that. I don't have it here. Verse 25 says, I want you to understand this mystery, dear brothers and sisters, so that you will not feel proud about yourselves. Some of the people of Israel have hard hearts, but this will only last until the full number of Gentiles come to Christ, and so all Israel will be saved. What's the mystery? Right now, only a sliver of Israel is being saved, but in the last days, all of Israel will be saved. Right now, it's the Gentiles being grafted in. The mystery is God's not rejected them, but he's also resisting them. How can that be? It's either or. No, it's not either or. It's both and. It's a very important theological concept to grab in understanding New Testament theology. We're so Western in our thinking, it has to be black and white, but there are tensions and then there are antitheses in Scripture. Trinity is one, hypostatic nature of Christ is one, the dual nature of Scripture, God breathed, man written, that's another tension. We have these mysteries that we have to study and enlighten our minds to. And you're not going to enlighten your mind watching some 22-year-old YouTube channel who wants you to crush it. Just crush that like button. Just smash that subscribe button so we can keep bringing you this awesome content. Lord have mercy on you if that's what you feed on. Let's keep reading. A few have found the favor, the ones God has chosen, but the hearts of the rest were hardened, as the scripture says. God has put them into a deep sleep to this day. He has shut their eyes so that they do not see, and he's closed their ears so that they do not hear. Likewise, David said, let their bountiful table become a snare, a trap that makes them think all is well. Let their blessing cause them to stumble, and let them get what they deserve. Let their eyes go blind so they cannot see, and let their backs be bent forever. That's Paul saying God's not rejected them, but he's also blinded their eyes, cursed their table, and allowed them to become a snare. Verse 12 reads, did God's people stumble and fall beyond recovery? Of course not. Here's the second question he asks. Has God rejected them? Of course not. Has God caused them to fall and stumble beyond recovery? Of course not. They were disobedient, so God made salvation available to us, the Gentiles. So here's this tension. I always envision it like a slinky going back and forth. The tension is they were disobedient so we could become obedient. Their hearts were hardened so that ours could become softened. They were rejected that we might be accepted. And yet God's not rejected them outright. He has brought salvation to us that he might bring salvation to them, but salvation was brought to them first, but they rejected it, so then it was extended to us. So I'm trying to help us answer the question, how am I as a Christian to view modern day Israel? We view it through the biblical lens. They are a modern society. They are a modern nation with a biblical history, but they don't govern their laws by the Bible, just like we don't. And I think the best thing I've heard said is we have to be careful of the double standard we want to impose upon Israel when it messes up. Yeah, they mess up. Yeah, they do dumb stuff, and they do stuff I don't agree with. I'm not going to give them a fair pass. And yet at the same time, we as Americans, we're full of so much spit and bravado and arrogance. We would fight for our borders. Consider this. Again, I'm not a fan of people dying in any kind of war, but this is going to sound like I'm like just absolutely pro-Israel, but consider the hypocrisy here. And I don't have the statistics fully. We experienced 9/11 and then threw ourselves into two conflicts, one in Afghanistan and one in Iraq, for nearly 20 years, to the tune of trillions of dollars spent to get vengeance and to crush Islamic jihadism. We lost 3,500 lives in 9/11, and we lost more people than that fighting international wars on terror, and killed, I think the last number I read was over 1 million people have died in Iraq and Afghanistan because of our military presence there. Listen, I support America. I support our right to defend ourselves, and I support any nation's right to defend its borders, including Ukraine, though I don't think Ukraine is a clean nation. I think they're as corrupt as the Russians are. So I think probably the best way to balance this down the middle of the road is beware the double standard. Beware the double standard. Let's go back now and look at scriptures and what Paul says about Israel and salvation for the Jews, because don't forget, we're in this world, we're not of it. We're not going to get entangled too much with jingoism, patriotism, Democrats, Republicans. Our job is to be kingdom-minded and to see as many people come to Christ as possible. That includes the Jews. Jesus Christ said, you must be born again, and therefore the Jews must be born again. Why not pray for the peace of Palestine, West Strip, or Gaza, or Lebanon, or Syria? Jesus Christ wants all of them to be born again. All of them. Let's keep reading. He wanted his own people to become jealous and claim it for themselves. Verse 12. Now, if the Gentiles were enriched because the people of Israel turned down God's offer of salvation, think how much a greater blessing the world will share when they finally accept it. We want Israel to receive the blessing of Jesus Christ because Paul says, think of how much greater a blessing the world will share when they, the Jews, finally receive Christ as their Messiah. Verse 13, I am saying all this especially for you Gentiles. God has appointed me as the apostle of the Gentiles. I stress this, for I want somehow to make the people of Israel jealous of what you Gentiles have, so I might save some of them. The fact that Paul's saying, I want to make the people of Israel jealous for what you have, that I might save some, goes back to this dichotomy, this tension, this mystery, that not every Jew is saved. Jews aren't going to heaven simply because they're God's people. Yes, he hasn't rejected them. Yes, he favors them, but they still must be born again. Paul is saying, I want to save some of them, which infers they're not saved. He wants to provoke them to jealousy through the salvation of the Gentiles, that they would reach out to their Messiah and receive the everlasting life he has to offer. Verse 15, for since their rejection meant that God offered salvation to the rest of the world, their acceptance will be even more wonderful. It will be life for those who were dead. And since Abraham and the other patriarchs were holy, their descendants will also be holy, just as the entire batch of dough is holy because the portion given as an offering is holy. For if the roots of the trees are holy, the branches will be too. And this is where Paul shifts his discourse and his allegory from the patriarchs, to dough and leaven, now to the tree. Verse 17, but some of the branches from Abraham's tree, some of the people of Israel, have been broken off. That symbolizes the judgment of God. And you Gentiles who are branches from a wild olive tree, you have been grafted in. So now you also receive the blessing God has promised Abraham and his children, sharing in the rich nourishment from the root of God's special olive tree. Israel is considered God's special olive tree. And yes, God does break branches off of his special olive tree that he might graft in everybody else who is not a Jew. Verse 18, but you must not brag about being grafted into to replace the branches that were broken off. You are just a branch, not the root. So how do we view Israel today? Israel, the Jewish people, they are the root. They're the root stock that brought forth the root of Jesse, and really the Hebrew is the sapling, the offshoot, the sucker. If you know anything about horticulture, when certain trees to reproduce, they begin to produce suckers off the base. And they cut down the Messiah, they cut down David, they cut down Israel, and then Messiah came out. He is the offshoot of Jesse. Israel is the root. Jesus Christ becomes the offshoot, and then we're grafted into all of that. He says, you're just a branch, you're not the root. Verse 19, well, you may say, those branches were broken off to make room for me. Yes, verse 20, but remember, those branches were broken off because they didn't believe in Christ. That affirms to us that Jews must believe in Jesus Christ or they will be broken off. If that's the only verse we have, it's a pretty good verse to stand on. You are there because you do believe. So don't think highly of yourself, but fear what could happen. For if God did not spare the original branches, he won't spare you either. This would be a verse that challenges the once saved, always saved concept in soteriology. Don't want to discuss that, but this is a verse that will back up a negation of once saved, always saved. Verse 22, notice how God is both kind and severe. He's severe towards those who disobeyed, but kind to you if you continue to trust in his kindness. So there's the caveat. We remain grafted in as long as we continue to trust in his kindness. But if you stop trusting, you also will be cut off. So here's another verse that says it may not be once saved, always saved, because if we stop trusting, we'll be cut off. Verse 23, and if the people of Israel turn from their unbelief, they will be grafted in again. They were originally part of the root stock. They were a natural branch of God's special olive tree. Their unbelief and their rejection of Christ broke them off. And we, being Gentiles, having a faith because we were evangelized, were grafted in. And Paul doesn't even allude to it. He says very clearly, if you don't continue in the faith, you will be cut off. And the Jews, if they begin to believe, will be grafted back in. Either way, everybody has access to the special root, the special tree called the nation of Israel, what Galatians 6 calls the Israel of God, which includes Jew and Gentile now. So if you want to take the Kabbalist or the Cabal mindset of the Jewish conspiracy, biblically, Christians are called the Israel of God. So, and then Corinthians talks about us being a Jew of the heart. So just dial back the anti-Semitic rhetoric and quit getting your news from somebody that needs you to smash that like button, all right? 22. Notice how God is both kind and severe. Verse 24, you by nature were a branch cut from a wild olive tree. So if God was willing to do something contrary to nature by grafting you into his cultivated tree, he will be far more eager to graft the original branches back into the tree where they belong. To me, this says that there are two calibers of people, the Jews and the Gentiles. And Paul multiple times here affirms they are special to him. He's not rejected them, but he's also not accepting them apart from faith. And he says here in this translation of the Bible, he is more eager, sort that out in Jesus Loves Me, This I Know. He just said he is more eager to graft the original branches back into the tree where they belong. Yes, he was eager to graft the Gentiles in. It was the will of God from the beginning. But he says here, he's more eager to graft Jews back into their salvation through Abraham's lineage. Verse 25, I want you to understand this mystery, dear brothers and sisters, and that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with the mystery of what to do with Israel in the modern day. Do we give them a fair pass on anything they want to do geopolitically? Absolutely not. We should hold them in checks and balances. I do believe they have a right to sovereign autonomy and defense of their boundaries. I find it humorous that those that want to protest, they don't like it if somebody breaks into their dorm room. They don't like it if the police violate their freedom of speech protest safe space. Maintain the same ethic. Don't be a double standard hypocrite, and things will go well, I think, for you and your testimony. We have to make sure we understand this is a mystery. They are accepted and not. They are beloved and rejected. They have been broken off, but God waits to eagerly regraft them back into the salvation that is theirs. Paul said as much. Salvation belongs to the Jews. Jesus Christ said as much to the Samaritan woman at the well. Salvation is of the Jews. And if you're going to go with the cabal, the Jewish cabal, to take over the world, you have to ask yourself, are those powerful men and women in high places, are they practicing Jews, or are they just of Jewish descent? And maybe they're just successful people that need Jesus Christ like you and I do. I want you to understand this mystery, dear brothers and sisters, so that you will not feel proud about yourselves. Some of the people of Israel have had hard hearts, but this will only last until the full number of Gentiles comes to Christ. And so all Israel will be saved. As the scripture says, the one who rescues will come from Jerusalem, and he will turn Israel away from ungodliness. And this is my covenant with them, that I will take away their sins. Verse 28, many of the people of Israel are now enemies of the good news, and this benefits you Gentiles. Yet they are still the people he loves. Many of the people of Israel are now the enemies of the gospel, yet they are still the people he loves. It's a tension. Do you see the tension? Many of the people of Israel, even in Paul's day, are an enemy to the gospel, and yet, Paul wrote, they are still the people he loves because he chose their ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. For the gifts and callings can never be withdrawn. Verse 30, once you Gentiles were rebels against him. But when the people of Israel rebelled against him, God was merciful to you instead. Now they are the rebels, and God's mercy has come to you so that they too will share in God's mercy. I hope you're seeing this tension that goes back and forth. And Paul's whole point to the Gentile is don't get into pride just because you're a believer, and don't hate them just because they're God's present-day enemy in opposing the gospel. Now, I want to give you one more verse here, one more passage in the end of Galatians chapter 6. The whole epistle of Galatians is trying to help the believers at Galatia not fall back under Judaism. They were Judaizers moving among the churches, trying to put people back under the law, trying to teach them to be circumcised, trying to get folks back under the Torah-observant nature of the Judaizers of the time. So Galatians 3:1 famously says, "Oh, you stupid Galatians, who has bewitched you? Having begun in the Spirit, are you now made perfect by the law?" So he's trying to bring them out of the law that they had fallen back under again. So we'll begin chapter 6, verse 12. Those who are trying to force you to be circumcised want to look good to others. They don't want to be persecuted for teaching that the cross of Christ alone can save, period. They were trying to teach that circumcision saves you. Paul said again and again and again, the cross of Christ alone can save. That shuts the door on all the having to keep the law, the kosher and all that. Yes, we keep the moral law. That's a big discussion in and of itself. Paul's passage here to the church at Galatia, the cross of Christ alone can save. And even those who advocate circumcision don't keep the whole law themselves. They only want you to be circumcised so they can boast about it and claim you as their disciples. Nothing's changed. People are still trying to gather people and make a great name for themselves. But those who put a big emphasis on circumcision Are they tithing on mint, anise, and cumin? Are they sacrificing the right animals? Have they committed adultery? Are they liars? Have they perjured? Have they slandered? Do they keep the fullness of the law? Or are they just caught up in emphasizing circumcision? Verse 14, as for me, may I never boast about anything except the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ. Why does he say that? Because of what he just said, the cross of Christ alone can save. So may I never boast in anything save the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ. And because of that cross, he continues, my interest in this world has been crucified. My interest in this world has been crucified to me. And the world's interest in me has also died. The world is no longer interested in Paul. Verse 15, doesn't matter what we've been circumcised, whether we've been circumcised or not. What counts is whether we have been transformed into a new creation, what Jesus called in John 3, being born again. If any man be in Christ, he is a new creation. So Paul tells the church at Galatia, it doesn't matter if we cut away the foreskin of your private areas. What matters is if you've been transformed into a new creation. That's Paul's focus. Nothing but the cross of Christ can save, and the cross of Christ transforms us into a new creature. If any man be in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things have passed away, all things have become new, and all things are of God. Paul is trying to show us the Jews aren't saved through their works. They're not saved through their law. They're saved through their Messiah, and it makes them a new creature. Let's continue. What counts is whether we have been transformed into a new creation. Verse 16, may God's peace and mercy be upon all who live by this principle. What's the principle? The cross of Christ alone can save. That's the principle. It's not the circumcision principle. It's not the keeping of the Torah principle. It's the cross of Christ. And he says, God's peace and mercy will be upon all who live by this principle. They are the new people of God. They are the new people of God. That's the New Living Translation. King James says, they are the Israel of God. Who? Those that live by this principle. What principle? Only the cross of Christ can save. So in that regard, we could say, we who are born again, we who live by this principle, we're the Israel of God. We're the new people of God. That's why the New Living Translation puts it that way. They are the new people of God. It's not far to say that we're the new Jews. Now, we're not Jews by ethnicity. We're not Jews by birth. We're the people of God. We're the people that have received the salvation that is of Christ. We are the Israel of God now, according to what Paul wrote in Galatians 6. From now on, don't let anybody trouble me with these things, for I bear on my body the scars that show I belong to Jesus Christ. So what's our takeaway here? How do we view Israel? Israel today is more of a world power than sandals and donkeys. When you and I'm guilty of this, when we think of Israel, we think, oh, little town of Bethlehem. We think Silent Night, Holy Night. We think Palm Sunday. We think Israel still looks like that, and it does not. They are a very diverse nation with Arabs and Jews and all sorts of minority groups and different ethnicities and different religions and different flavors of different religions. If they want to be blessed, they ought to keep the Bible. They ought to obey the Scripture, just like if America wants to be blessed. We ought to do the Bible. We ought to teach our people to do the Bible. Are there successful Jewish people in high places? Absolutely. I had one statistic for you. The Jewish people are 0.2% of the world's population, and yet they hold 23% of all Nobel Prizes. They are 0.2% of the world's population, and they hold 23% of all Nobel Prizes because there's something about them, the favor of God that is upon them, the ancient favor, not the salvation favor, God's special people favor, that it causes their mind to be quickened, that causes their families to prosper. It causes them to land in any culture around the world and start businesses and flourish while they're also being persecuted for being different. Our job as Christians is not to be anti-Semitic. Our job as Christians is to hate evil, even in the church, even in the Marine barrack, even in the frat house, even in the White House. We're to hate evil everywhere, even in our house. Our job is to love the sinner, preach to them the gospel, pray for the salvation of mankind, and pray for revival, that his kingdom would come and his will would be done on earth as it is in heaven. Stay in the Bible. Stop following people that pervert your mind and then ask you to like them for doing so. And I think it'll go much better for your life. Be students of the Word and study Paul's writings. It will help your theology. Amen. We'll see you next time. I hope you have a great week.